And man, we're boom, we're live. And well, I'm. This is an edition of this podcast that I've been. I think it's been a long time in coming, man. And I've been really kind of looking forward to talking to tonight's guest for a long time. We've been building up for a while, and well, it's finally here tonight. So well, before I sort of introduce you a bit more, Kevin, how you doing tonight, my man?
I'm doing good. A little bit nervous because, as I was saying to you, it's been a while since I've done anything like this. As you know, I have my own radio slot on Tir Na Saor, but it's been a couple of months now since I've done anything live online. So, and I'm also very excited to speak about what we're going to speak about tonight. And I guess that's where a little bit of the nerves are coming from as well. I want to really make sure that I convey the principles and the concepts we're going to talk about very well. So.
Well, I mean, man, like I say, we're just we'll be fine. We'll just go straight into it, and and sort of like take it on, because, like I say, I was saying to you before the podcast, I think there's a lot of synergy between what you do, particularly what you're doing. We're founding up the Brehon Law Academy, and where we are at with N99 and the Safe Network in general. I think there's a lot of synergy, which I know we're going to discuss more. But I mean, before I sort of go any further, and for people listening out there, I think a great place to start would be well, how did you get to the point you are now? I mean, obviously you're based over in Ireland. Sort of like, sort of give us a potted history of how you've got to this point in the journey.
Well, I'll try and keep it brief. Like, I guess I was one of those kids who was always into, I was a big reader when I was younger. I had a lot of questions. I was a big thinker, and that just carried with me through my teens. And it was in 2009, information that I'd come across online to do with this notion called the free man movement. And this got me very interested straight away, because what I understood it to be was, challenging our preconceived presumptions that we have about the state and about the legal system and about authority in general. So that really sparked off my path that I'm on now in terms of activism. And so I founded Tir Na Saor, which means Land of the Free, in 2009. And the purpose of this was really to, at the time, it was just really to kind of touch base with other people who were, thinking about these same ideas, and to meet up and to talk about how we could introduce these into our lives, how we could spread the information. And it's just really grown from there. And it's been a roller coaster of a ride. Things happened, and things that I had never anticipated, things that I never signed up for, and it's been a really adventure. Learning these concepts, and then even having the opportunity once or twice to try them out in court. And this kind of, while I was learning about all of this, it was really natural law, the principles of natural law and philosophy. So ideas that all men are born equally, and that we have natural rights, and that no man can take these rights away from us lawfully or justly, without our consent. That was really the crux of what this was all about. So this interest that I had, opportunity came along where I could go back to university, and I decided to study law. And anybody who knows me from school or from childhood would think that it was strange that I went back to study law. It's kind of out of character for me. But the reason I went to do it was because I wanted to get a real insight into, again, how the state works. And I didn't want to just get my information from internet forums and piecing it together myself haphazardly. So I went and I got my degree then, and I graduated in 2013. And all the while I was learning about this different way of looking at the legal system, I was acutely aware of the Brehon Law. I became aware of the Brehon Law around 2008, 2009, and it was something that interested me straight away. It's for those who don't know, the Brehon Law would be the system of law that was existing in Ireland for thousands of years prior to the Anglo-Norman invasions in the 1100s. So this legal system really piqued my interest, because I was seeing principles in it that synced up with freedom. It seemed to me to be a much better system than what we have today. So while I was in college, I used the opportunity to research the Brehon Law when I could, and I incorporated it into my studies. And one of the most important subjects I think anybody who's interested in law should focus on is jurisprudence. This is my favorite subject in college. It's legal philosophy. And you come to realize, and this is what the theory says, this is the academic theory that is used to support the law. You come to realize that there is no real accepted idea of what the law is. Like, nobody knows what it is. It's just, there's no real justification for it. There's different sort of philosophical notions that came along throughout history, but all they really try to do is justify the use of authority by either a government or a monarch and so on. So this really fascinated me, because I'm kind of thinking, so the law is this philosophical, fanciful notion that can't really be, it can't stand the test of time. It's not absolute. And this changed everything, especially in terms of our relationship to the state, our actual mental mindset that we have in relation to the state and authority, and the things that we do, the things that we feel we're supposed to do, the obligations that we have. So that once I left college, then I decided I really wanted to teach people about this, you know, because I found it fascinating, and not just the Brehon Law, but also early Irish culture, the mythology, the poetry. It's something that's really lacking over here at the moment, and I think you know, it's important for us to be in touch with our culture, our roots. So the aim of the Brehon Law Academy is to teach people the Brehon Law on one hand, and to kind of rekindle a love for early Irish culture on the other. And then where I'm at now at the moment is recently I've taken up a position as a local coordinator for Students for Liberty, European Students for Liberty. Actually wearing the t-shirt now, Peace, Love, Liberty. And this group it's an international organization that basically seeks to promote principles of what they would call liberalism. To me, it's the same principles as what I once called free man. It's the idea of freedom, but not just a philosophical notion, but the actual strong arguments that are kind of irrefutable and stand up to logic for why a free society is the only way that we can go forward. So this is a network of, I think, thousands of students across America and Europe and the whole world. I believe they have representatives in every country, and the main objective of this is to just to provide resources to students and to get the dialogue going, to show them that there is another way to live. There's another way for us to I say govern ourselves, that doesn't involve you know, totalitarian control or statism or the giving away of our power to people who do not have the capacity to make the decisions that we need them to make. So I guess that's really bringing us up to where I am now, just taking up this position, and I'll be working with people in Ireland and the UK throughout the year, hosting events and student events and debates to promote the ideas of liberty.
Well, I think it's, I mean, this is why I'm really, you know, fascinated to really sort of like dig into this, you know, in this conversation tonight, because as I said to you before the podcast we're live, I think there's a real synergy between this ancient law, which is, I think, one of the you know, I've often discussed this before many times in this podcast, is that I think one of the mistakes we as humanity make is that we tend not to learn from things past, but on the other hand, there's this duality going on, that we're born into this culture. I said this before, you know, we're born into a world that we didn't decide any of this. We didn't decide what culture we were going to be born into, where we were going to be born, and all these rules and these laws and everything that we've been, it's basically just a momentum of past events and by people that are long time dead. And that's what I'm saying. So we get almost stuck in this mindset, like I say, we're all fed this every day. And I've said this before. I mean, you know, from the minute we enter, you know, state education, we're just stripped their history, and we, you know, I mean, like I say, when I was, I think it's one of the fascinating things about the times we live in at the moment. When I was at school and I was going to education, I was never taught about the Brehon Law or about anything. I was just taught lines of you know, the Crown and how they, you know, which who succeeded who and what they did, what was great, and all that. You just learned this one-sided state, this the English view of the culture in the world. And then you, as you know, you wake. That's the wake-up moment when you realise, well, wait a minute, there's all this other stuff going on. But like I say, leading back to what my point being, I think there's a mistake that we don't look back to old laws and we think that things have always been the way they have. Now, one of the fascinating things that this is why I really want to sort of like, I'd love to hear your insights, and you know more about it than probably a lot of people I know. Definitely I know, and a lot of probably the people around, is that this is an old system. I mean, you mentioned there this has gone back ancient, and I know that a lot of the manuscripts that that this has been based on were just torn up manuscripts from a long time ago. And you did mention in one of your articles, and again one of your lectures you can find on your YouTube channel, that you were saying that this goes back a long time. Now, the implication from this being, and what the whole point of the Brehon Law, which I really want to sort of like to sort of like tell us more about, was this is a system that basically that had worked efficiently and was named, was well known around the world as being one of the most just systems to be brought up in. You know what I mean?
That's correct, yeah.
And there was no state control. There was no, just things like kingships and stuff like this. But the point I'm trying to make was that this has gone on for a long time, and then the British Crown and the state, and we walked in and we decided that you should be under our territory, and there's a whole. Which which is another whole rabbit hole we could go right down and talk about all that. But just generally is that this has been going along for a long time, and it was seen as a really noble and just society. So again, tell us the history of the Brehon Law and how it worked, and how it worked in general sort of principles, and basically, and again, sort of like, I think it's really important to sort of emphasize, because I think it's really important where we are now, that the way that these laws has disappeared wasn't out of choice or because they didn't work. They were cut from from everything by an imperialistic state. And I think this is really important, because it's the point I'm trying to make. These laws obviously had worked for a long time, were succeeded by another state. So I think, like I say, tell us more about the history and how this came about, and just please just tell us more.
I think you're really getting to the crux over here, and this is one of the observations that the realizations that I came to when I was studying in university, is that when we think of the conflict in Ireland, and this is all over the world. I just came back from a conference in Germany with Students for Liberty, and people would ask about the Protestant and Catholic issue. So people often think that it's a religious, and it was always a religious conflict. But the fact is, the Protestant Church didn't exist until Henry VIII. There was already, the Anglo-Normans, I would stress, were there for many hundreds of years before that. So the conflict is something else. And I think you're dead right. It was a clash of culture, a clash of legal system, very much because the legal system defines the culture. A legal system of a people or a set of laws tells us what those people's standards are, their morals, their expectations, and how they deal with offences, remedy. That tells us a lot about the people. So the nature of the Brehon Law was so diametrically opposed to what we think of today as the law the law of the crown, that it did not sync up. There couldn't be no harmony there, because the mindset of the people was so far removed from what was being imposed. There's another thing I need to stress here. This notion that the Brits invading, which is still kind of strong in some parts of the country, people need to realize their history, and that King Henry I was given a decree. He was given a grant, permission by the Pope, the Vatican, to do this. They didn't just come in and invade and become the kings of Ireland. At first, they were known as the Lords of Ireland, the Dominus Hiberniae, and he was an agent for the Pope. And his role, the king's role, was to collect a penny tax from every household in Ireland to pay to the Vatican, and that's important for people to know, because we get stuck on this Catholic Protestant thing, and we forget that there was an earlier culture where we were one people, and I mean the British Isles of England and Ireland and Scotland and Wales. Their culture was what we might call, I don't call it Celtic, I call it Gaelic. It'd be closer to it, but because saying Celtic is kind of like saying European. it's covered a much broader set of people with differences among them. Gaelic is more specific. So that's just important to point out at the start. But when we talk about the Brehon laws, or any of the manuscripts that we have, and many of them have been destroyed, but even still, we still have more than any country in Europe. The manuscripts all describe the laws as being, since time immemorial, as old as the rocks themselves. Something that stretches into antiquity in the mind of even to us what is now ancient. And how these laws worked and why they were successful was because they didn't come from the top down. You mentioned there was kings, but the kings could not make laws in the same sense that the monarch, say, of England or any other country could make a law. They didn't have totalitarian or total authority over the people. They were very much a sort of servant to the people. They had a role within the dynamic of the community, which was more of a priest, ceremonial figure, than a lawgiver. So how the laws would be created was from the people up, through custom, through use over time, through general practice, and always with a view towards harmony, restitution, compensation. We have to live together. We might as well get on with each other. From time to time, we might cause accidents or we might willfully harm each other. But how do we settle that as a community? The English common law system, which is what we still have in Ireland, is an adversarial system all over the world. It's adversarial. That you go in against your brother, you go in against your neighbor, you go in against a stranger, and you are enemies. There is no harmony. There is battle, and one party is victorious and one party is defeated, and that's the common law legal system. So already there's some clear distinctions that we're starting to see here between the two systems. And a common thread that goes through the Brehon laws is the freedom of the individual. I have to put a caveat in and say there was slavery. Forms of slavery did exist, but among the free men, there was this idea that you were a sovereign in yourself. I often say to people now, Irish people, that if you have an Irish surname, you've descended from Irish royalty, because every Irish family was a clan, was a tua, had its own limited amount of sovereignty, its limited amount of power. If you were to step into the threshold of another man's house or another man's piece of land, that was his kingdom. You are now under his law. So in this way, he could offer you protection. He could bring you under his wing. And then if somebody was to come and cause an offense against you, he would be the injured party, you see. We get these themes when we see films about old history and things like that, when they'd approach the chief of the tribe. And even in modern documentaries, they do this as well. When they go to, say, African tribes and so on, or Amazonian tribes, they have to approach the chief and ask for permission to be there and ask for his blessing. So another thing I wanted to point out, what I think of it, when I was studying jurisprudence and comparative law, I had an opportunity to look at things like Hindu law, Somalian tribal law, Sharia law, Native American law, Aboriginal law. And at first it came as a surprise to me, but then it seemed so logical that all of these legal systems have way more in common with each other than what they differ on. They are almost identical legal systems. So what this tells me, in a way that we can observe historically, that this is what human beings look like when they're left to organize themselves without centralized control, without totalitarianism, without dictatorship. This is what it looks like. So very strong justification for these legal systems that lasted. All of them lasted thousands of years. Some of them even exist to this day. And it's like that's one legal system. And the other legal system is imperialism, colonialism, control, centralization. And that's really the clash of culture that what we're talking about here.
Yeah, man. I think it's fascinating what you were tapping into, and I think what's, like I say, it's almost one of the things that they say is the first ways of controlling us as human beings is to take over our sovereignty and to say that they own us, and that's just this is one of the things that why I think it's really important, and I think a lot of people are going through this wake-up moment, and I think it's important to discuss this moment because I don't think many people realise of how much that they are owned, or basically whatever state or laws they're living under, how that generalized state will basically think they own the person as a sovereign being. You know, they own. That's why they make rules about what you can't, you know, certain substances you can take, some substances you can't take. And this is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's like you said. I think you was a fascinating point when you said that, you know, we're all sovereign people, and this idea of kingship, and that's what I was trying to mean, was the idea of kingship was basically like tribal, and like you said, it's how a lot of people have lived. And I like I say, I'm now based, as you know, in Scotland, and you know, Scotland was exactly the same. Everything was completely, you know, clan related, and you know, and this seemed to work for a long time. And again, it was only central control by people and states trying to basically land grab, as it's always been. You know, this is one of the common things that if you know anything and you dig deep into you know, into history of the world, and just open your eyes a bit, you realize that the world and the history we're taught is just by the people who have written the history, and those people are the you know, the people of the kingships and the governments and the states, and they write their history, and we're informed on it. But you know, as you know, which is what I've realised more and more and more, and I think it's like you said again, it's really fascinating. You mentioned this as well. That this is, I've been lucky enough to go around the world, and I've seen this, and you know, I've lived in places, and you know, where there is no control, and this, like you said, this natural law comes out. You know what I mean? And it tends to be as you said, the chieftain. But that chieftain tends to be, in the places I've lived, you know, Venezuela, particularly when we lived in this current environment for a year, was the person who was the oldest in the village, and not because they were, they're wise because of their age, but because they had wisdom to impart. But everything was done, like I say, in this kingship area, and it was all sorted out. Didn't need to have any authority bases and stuff like that. And I think it's like you say, maybe I think it's really akin to what we are as a human beings, that we are born free, and the rules that we think that they're there and they're just natural law, and we're told that they're there, have all of them been put down. And I think one of the I was reading up the other day about, you know, the Brehon Law. One of the things that really inspired me, and I'll just sort of quote it to you, and I love to sort of, you know, because I think this really sort of sums up about how almost the mindset of people, you know, when they're given the freedom and they're not given central control, and this is, like I say, it's a reflection from history, and I think it's really inspiring to where we are right now. And this is the quote I want to give it. It was 3 things one should keep always before them. 1, their worldly duties. Secondly, their conscience. And 3rd, the laws of nature. Now that's from an old manuscript, you know, that was, you know, part of the Brehon Law. So again, you know, tell us more about that, because I think that was a really inspiring kind of you know, insight into the mindset of how those people were, you know, and how that law kind of works.
Well, yes, you hit on a good point when saying that we're born free. There's a crucial part of that, though. As human beings, we're born absolutely free, but at the same time, we're born absolutely dependent. We're dependent on our parents for protection, for nourishment, to educate us and to guide us into adulthood. So this idea of dependency goes hand in hand with our freedom, okay? So who do we owe our obligations to in that sense? If we're raised by our parents and our family and the community, I love that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, then the obligation is first of all on the parents to instill in that child the expectations of the society, the community norms, and then the duty is on the child to not let the family down, to not, you know, to have honor, to have dignity when they go out about their business.
Yeah.
Now, there's a big part of the problem here. There's a poison element in our ecosystem, and this is the state. This is this idea of a fictional construct that steps in now as father and mother, as provider, protector, and guide, telling you what the law is, telling you how you should live your life, and then it expects from you duties in return. It expects from you to obey its laws without question. And I wanted to go back to something else you said, when states act as though, you know, they own people. Well, according to law, international law states that citizens belong to the state, and therefore the state can do whatever it wants to its citizens because it's sovereign. This is why we have things like human rights legislation and the treaties that United Nations draws up. United Nations is the law of sovereigns. That's what it's called. Okay, and the sovereigns that they're talking about are the state. So what has happened here is the states have sort of funneled up the concept of individual sovereignty and how we do business and exchange with each other, and has kind of donned on a cloak as an individual. And the state says, I am an individual and I am a sovereign and I speak for all of these units of people. And they sit at a table, and France draws up a contract with Great Britain, and that's the only thing that binds them. The fact that they've now made an agreement to one another, their honor is on the line, and if France reneges on the agreement, then Britain can turn around and say, hold on a second, you've dishonored, here's your word, you've gone against it. If that word doesn't exist, there is no obligation. Okay, so a state agrees not to harm its citizens under human rights legislation. Without that agreement, then it does belong to the state, according to these concepts of law that we use today. Now, I remember when I was studying international law in college, and this was, again, all of this is in the back of my head when I'm in college, and I'm continuously looking for how to relate it back to the idea of freedom and to the ancient legal systems. And in international law, there's 4 characteristics in order for a state to be considered a sovereign entity. One of them is it must have a population, it must have a government, it must have effective control of a territory, and it must have recognition from other sovereign states. And that last piece of recognition is the most important. So when we consider the uprising of the rebels in Libya, Gaddafi and Gaddafi's government was the legitimate voice for the Libyan people at that point, and the rebels rose up. At a certain point, the rebels became the legitimate voice for the Libyan people. When did that happen? When they were recognized as that voice. First, France was the first country to do it, but it was the recognition of the sovereignty of that group that gave them the status. So I apply this to ourselves, because what I assert is, I claim that the principles of international law, which is the law of sovereigns, is the original law that used to bind us, the law of sovereigns. Because a population, well, I have a population, it's one, but it's still a population. My territory is my body.
Mm-hmm.
My government is my mind. If you look at the original meaning of the word government, and that's a whole other angle we could go down, but govern comes from the Latin gubere, which means to control, and ment, as in mental, mens rea, it means the mind. So it's a form of mind control, you could assert. But I have control of my mind, and unlike most governments in the world, my population supports my government, and my government supports my population. So I'm missing one thing. I'm missing recognition. What I need is myself to recognize those qualities in you, and extend that sovereignty to you through my recognition, and you extend that recognition to me, and we bow to each other as sovereigns. We say namaste. We recognize each other as equals, and we say, I have no obligation over you. You have no obligation over me. We are free at this point, but we can agree to something. We can have a meeting of the minds, as another word for contract. Consensus ad idem, meeting of the minds. And when we have a meeting of the minds, agree to do a certain thing or refrain from doing a certain thing, now we're creating law. Now law is being formed. Because if I fail to do what I've agreed to do, then you can hold up the contract. You can hold me to my word, and you can say, on your honor, you broke your word, and I want remedy. So what we need in a society is not government or centralized control of rules, or even definitely not economics and society in any shape or form. What we need is a rule of law, a way that if there is a breach of contract or a breach of or harm is caused by one person to another, is there a way that we can find a remedy for this that creates harmonious outcome for everybody involved? So our legal system looks at the criminal as an other, looks at them as like, you know, something to be shunned and locked away in a prison. Whereas there's valid reason to say that the criminals in society is evidence of a broken society. Mm-hmm. Society where there is lack, and society where people aren't getting the opportunities that they need to have a full and free life. So our answer to criminality in this day and age is to put them into a cell with other people. Maybe over in Ireland, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Ireland we have serious overcrowding issues. And in our main prison in Dublin, Mountjoy Prison, they still what's called slop out. I'm sure you can use your imagination for what that means. And it's barbaric and animalistic. And if you treat somebody like an animal, they're going to behave like an animal. So this is our answer. There was a professor of philosophy, Kwame Anthony Appiah, professor of philosophy at Princeton. And he said, well, what will future generations condemn us for? And he said, well, the treatment of the environment, the treatment of animals in the meat production industry.
Yeah.
And he said prisons. He said they're going to condemn us for prisons.
Yeah.
So we're using medieval solutions to problems that can be solved using the common values in society, respect for each other's dignity and freedom. But that we still need to deal with the issue of criminality. How did they do it in the Brehon Law? Well, first of all, they didn't blame people. They didn't affix blame on somebody and make them feel like that they were a lesser person because of what they had done. Because they understood that we are all fallible and everybody will make mistakes. That's not the issue. The issue is, what do you do once you have made a mistake, whether it was by accident or design? Are you willing to make amends? Can you offer restitution? Or are you going to be an outlaw? Are you going to turn away from the community? Are you going to create disharmony and turn your back on the standards of community and become an outlaw? So this was really how it was dealt with in ancient times. I mean, every single offence could be compensated for through restitution, and that was up as high as murder. And then there's an argument to be made whether compensating somebody for murder is valid, is a good idea. Should we put a price tag on the loss of life? Your probably gut reaction would be to say, no, that doesn't seem right. But do we not do that when we put a price tag, as in the amount of time somebody spends on prison? If it's 7 years or whatever amount of years, is that not the same as equating a value to that life? The only difference is when we put them in prison, we're depriving society of the labor and the mind of that person. The person who is the injured party is in the family, get no compensation whatsoever. They get no restitution. And the person that we put into prison is hardly going to come out as a better, more upstanding member of society. So the problem of crime continues. And then one final thing would be, how did the Brehons view crime itself? Our legal system does it back to front. You would think that a crime needs a victim. That would make sense. But according to English common law, the legal system that we have today, a crime is an offence against the state. It's an offence against society as a whole. So I'll give you an example for that. If you were a shopkeeper and someone came in and shoplifted from you, the police would come and prosecute them for shoplifting under the criminal law of the state. But you would get a compensation for that. But you would still have the right to take that criminal to court in the civil law for loss of property or loss of earnings and the financial loss that you've suffered. So that's in itself, that's kind of a double jeopardy. But the way they reason it's actually cognitive dissonance is what they have. So where's I gone now? Under the Brehon Law, a crime is simply a lapse in the standards of personal honor and brotherly kindness. And that covered accidental or willful injuries. So the way people carried themselves throughout society, the principles that they had in their head of the standards of what was expected for them, was produced good behavior, produced a willingness to find harmony in the law. And on that note, the one Englishman who was instrumental in abolishing the Brehon Law several hundred years ago, Sir John Davies. And I always quote this guy because I think it's interesting that his role was as an abolitionist of the Brehon Law. But what he said was that there's no nation of people under the sun that loves justice better than the Irish. And nor will they rest better satisfied with the execution thereof even though it be against themselves, because they knew that one day if they required it, they could rely on it. So more or less what he's saying is that these people loved the law so much, it was like a joy for them to go to a court case and see the principle of justice, see fairness being articulated right before their eyes. And even if they were the one who was accused, they would still rejoice in the judgment, because they realized that if it was reversed, that would be the fairest outcome, and that would be what they would want for themselves. So I think maybe we're a long way away from that sort of idealism. But it comes with self-awareness. It comes with being willing to look at these ideas, to explore concepts of classical liberalism, law, philosophy, and society, and talk about it. We need to talk about it, and that's what's lacking, I think, is that just people haven't got yet the framework, they don't have the idea to relate to in their minds, to look for answers in those ways.
No, and I think you're absolutely bang on what you're saying, because I think where I'm fascinated to what you were just you were digging into then about how the whole thing sort of function, and how, like you said, how it's just all been, our mindset has been basically changed. And I think this is one of the things that I think we're leading on to what you were just saying then about how where we are now, is that one of the things that I'm sure many people who listen to this, and it's one of the things, arguments I've had many times, or discussions I've been in with many times people before, they say they may agree. I think most people, when they start to realize figures and numbers, I mean this is just a figure I read the other week. I mean, there's more black people now in American jails than there ever was amount of slaves. Now, and you think, I mean, when people hear that, I mean, it's very hard, and unless you are a real, I don't know, you have to be I think you're stepping into areas where your personality can be almost sort of say, well, you're psychopathic in some ways, where you want, if you kind of hear those figures, and you think that it's all right to, like you said, to treat criminals as we do now by chucking them in a cage, throwing, just leaving them there. If people actually think that's the solution, I think they're kind of almost psychopathic, and they're into that kind of strain of life. Most people, when they, like I say, hear the figures and read the figures and understand what the criminal process is, and I think most people, especially now, and I think this generally in culture, I mean, you might not hear it in the media, but I think most people think it's, in 2015, for people to be thrown in a cage for smoking a plant, for instance, it's absolutely, it's insane. It's like you say, history will judge us, and that's one of the things that they will do. But on the other side, and it's one of the, I'm sure it's one of the frictions that you come against, and I know I've come against, is people say, yes, but if you don't have a state and you don't have a government, then it's just going to be anarchy. And then automatically they've got in their head the word anarchy, and they think we're all going to be chucking Molotovs, and that's their definition. And I don't want to get into that whole thing, because that's just an Orwellian word control. But they most people, I would think, even like I say, even if they would agree and they would go, I can sort of understand how our justice system is completely wrong, but they always have this fear. And I'm going to almost play devil's advocate with you. Would be saying, someone would say, "Okay, it's well and good, man. I love what you're saying about this idea of kinship and and law, the paying of restitution and stuff like that." And people would say, "Oh yeah, but that works when you're living in a nice little little tribal society, but now we've got cities of 20 million people, and this would never work, and we need this central control, because if not, people will just run amok." And I'm just, again, this is just purely devil's advocate, because but I mean, I'm sure this is something that friction you come up against. So again, I mean, I personally, my angle has always been, I don't think people realize the power of like you called it, being an outlaw. I think when people banish people from society, that has a huge power, because if someone can't trade with somebody because it's like, we all know that you're just polluting the river, then there's going to be no benefit for you as a trader or a merchant. Again, if you're just an outlaw, a person who's just doing bad to, say, children, or you're just constantly causing damage to other human beings, well, you can't go too long on this planet without being pushed from one out and out and out, and you know, that's good luck to you. You're going to have to live that life. And there is a
Yeah.
massive power in that, because, like you said, we're all born into kinships, we're all born into tribes, we're all born into families, we all understand that we're, as like you said, we're all individuals and we're all free men, but we're all on a rock. We all share this one rock that's just tumbling through space. That's what I'm saying. I want to sort of, I'm sure it's a friction you come against, and people would say this to you and say, "Oh, that's great. I mean, if we all lived in a lovely hippy dippy, you know, ideal world where we're all living amongst 150 people in a tribe, that's great. But what do we do about cities and the world we live in right now? How's this going to be applicable to the world we live in right now? How would you?
Yeah.
How was your answer to those?
I think we're getting into, you know, into what I would call what's known as classical liberalism, the arguments for a free society. And I mean, this might sound like a bit of a cop-out to say that, well, it's honest. It's the honest answer is, like, I don't have the answers for these questions. But that's, I'm not obligated to have an answer for these questions when we can see how corrupt the system is. Like, that's what's important. What's important is what we're doing wrong, and we need to have the freedom to figure these things out ourselves. What happens when you have centralization is that knowledge gets stifled, because the people who are in the government, they only have a limited pool of knowledge. It moves very slow. They have all this bureaucracy. Ideas move, and information moves a lot quicker on the ground level. So we're being stifled from this development. And in terms of the cities, you know, where they, how good of an idea were cities in the first place? You know, there's massive areas that are completely barren and rural. I'm living down in a rural part of Ireland at the moment, and like shops are boarded up, all the young people are leaving. I mean, and then you have cities where suicide rates are off through the roof. You know, and I'm not saying that we should all go back and live in the jungle or live in the forest or anything like that. And we have to respect the fact that some people will want to choose the state, even given all the logical arguments against it. Yes. Some people will want to choose that. My position would be that they should be free to choose that. But the problem is they're not allowing me the freedom not to choose it.
Yes.
There is no option to opt out of this. You're a citizen, you belong to us, you will do what we say, and if you don't like it, we're going to come to your house, we're going to use force against you, and we're going to put you in a cage. This is the year 2015, and we have these medieval, backward, you know, barbaric ways of dealing with, and the government that's in power, even if it is democracy, which is, you know, don't even get me started on democracy, and people bandy this around like it's such this, like, you know, brilliant, you know, pinnacle of human existence that we say whoever has the biggest gang wins, and they can decide what happens to the smaller gangs. You know, but even if it is in a democracy, you have this notion where you elect representatives, okay, and only certain sort of people want to do that job. Only certain sort of people become politicians, and they work at it for years and years and years, scratching backs, you know what I mean? All of this sort of behind the scenes stuff, to learn what politics is really about, and then maybe they might get onto the party, and maybe they might get elected, and it's just pantomime for the masses, as far as I can see. Yeah. And the people who are in these governments are not representing the interests of society, because society has very different interests. All throughout, everybody in society has very different interests. They are representing a sectional interest of a few people of society, and then imposing that on everybody else. That's wrong. That's just like, it doesn't work. Now, they will use a rhetoric of this idea of the public interest and the common good. We have to bail the banks out because it's in the public interest that we do this. We have to cut, you know, we have to take away from the weakest in society because it's for the common good that we do this. Well, I would say that there is no such thing as the public interest as they talk about it. All there is members of the public who have personal interests. That's what public interests for me is what I determine it is, and the interest for you is what you determine it is. So this is like part of the rhetoric that the state uses to justify its position. But really, like, there's no the people who would resist and say, well, you know, how are we going to do this? How are we going to? Who's going to build the roads? But that's not that's not good enough retort to the fact that we're empowering. We're saying basically, oh wait, there's bad people in society, so let's empower a small few people of society to stop the bad people in society, but then we put the bad people into power. I mean, it's nonsense, and we need to evolve from this sort of thinking. I refuse to accept that we are at the pinnacle of human existence and human organization and society. You know, I'm not a utopian. I'm very practical in my view, and to be honest, I don't know what the people in the cities are going to do. Hopefully, there will be ways for them to live a different life in the future. You know, maybe communes, I don't think are the right way to go or anything like that. You know, I don't really know what way we can do it, but I do know that what we're doing now is wrong, and we need to stop doing it.
Yeah, and I think this is where the complete synergy to, you know, this is why I you know, I can never say it enough times. I think this is an epoch moment in the human journey where we are right now. And I think these are the greatest days. And I think the reason I put the two together, and I think they are, because I think everything we discussed so far has basically been this whole theme of what we've been saying before, is that we've never had, like you said, we've been given lack of choices, you know, and suddenly now, and this is one of the things that where people, again, you know, want to see it, don't want to see it, you know, technology is joining and connecting people, and this is where the synergy comes in, because I think for the first time, and I'm old enough, and I've been down this path a long time, and that's why I say it is the greatest days, because I've been wanting something like, you know, where we are now to happen for a long time. And the idea that we've now got the ability, and it's not, you know, in the hands of anybody to hand out this ability to me, it's for us all to basically empower and connect to this, is we've got the ability to, like you said, to walk away. And this is where these things it's going to be the epoch moment. It's going to shift everything, because I'm like you. I think one of the illusions and distractions that, you know, the people out there, and it's, you know, we say all the time, is they have an answer for everything. They've got this one line answer for everything. And I think one of the powerful words to say in the three powerful words to say in this world is, I don't know. Do you know what? I don't know. So that's like, I agree with you completely. I don't know about the future.
The wise man knows that he's a fool.
Exactly. I don't know the future, but all I know is that, you know, is that we should all be having choices, and that's what I'm saying. And whether some people want to stay in the state and they want to have that kind of life, that's up to them. I mean, there's still people now that want to go and, you know, they think they're living in the medieval Britain, and they're dressing up and they live that life. That's up to them. That's great. You're not harming me. I don't mind. You can live any life you like. It's all about choices. And I think this is, you know, this is always my sort of answer back to the cities. I don't know, but I think that. This is what I think where we're at right now. If you give people the ability not to, or to have the choice where they can create anything they want to do, and have, you know, someone directly at the other side paying them directly for whatever they create, whatever it may be, where they may be a wood carpenter, a tea maker, an artist, a musician, it could be anyone. I mean, everybody's got the potential to make something and create something, if it's just knowledge, poetry, anything, you know what I mean? But that once you directly connect people in this way, I think this is where I think there's places like when people are given that opportunity. I think, as I don't know what the future will be. I think cities in the future will dissipate, and they will still be there. But how many people do we know? And I've lived around the world, and people just are in cities because they are still in this day and age told to put a tie on, put a suit on, go into an office. Not allowed to use certain words. Oh, you can't say this. You can say in the dining room, "Oh, fuck, cast, piss," but you dare say that in work, and then you're and they're driven into these boxes, which is all about this whole, as we're saying, this mindset, this mind control, just to keep us along this path. And I think once you give people the opportunity to break away from that, I think a lot of people wouldn't choose to get on that rag reel. I don't think there's a great percentage of people who are stuck in the traffic every morning thinking, what am I doing this for? I'm doing this because I've got to pay a mortgage. And this is where we are right now. And this is why I think it's a really inspiring days, because soon, and it's coming day by day, and this is not just with the safe network and you know, and you know what that's going to bring, but you're already seeing this in so many forms. You're seeing Bitcoin, you're seeing decentralization happening in all over the place, and it's going to change everything. And like you said, how it's going to change, I don't know, but I definitely think it's going to change everything. And I think this is where the two are synergizing, and that's what I'm saying. This is wisdom. This is what I wanted to have this whole discussion about tonight, was to learn from the the great things and the wisdom that's being sent down from things like the Brehon Law, and how we can implement that into where we are now, because we're almost in the same position. We can set up our own little free world, and we can, okay, how can we, what wisdom can we learn? So if there was some really, I don't know, from someone who's, you know, who's studied the Brehon Law and stuff like that, what do you think are maybe the top sort of 5, 6, whatever it could be, you know, things that you think will really be applicable to the new digital world and the new world that's coming? I mean, two things that you think, wow, that would be that would really synergize, and you think would actually work right now.
Well, I might have to think a little bit about that one.
Okay.
Well, if you think of the internet, how it works at the moment, there is no king of the internet telling us how we can use the internet and what we can put up on it. And good content generally gets more views because it's good, and bad content generally gets less views because it's not so good. I mean, the internet is an anarchic or a free society in that sense. So we can already see that how the internet is running has these same principles. But I think, crucially, when we talk about the Brehon Law or the natural legal systems of the world, principles that we're used to today came from that. I mean, we had property rights, we had individual rights, we had inheritance, we had contract law before modern legal systems came along, and they basically adopted those principles because they are seen to be consonant with reason and truth and justice. So, I mean, the principles that you could bring into it, I guess, are those same principles. One thing that's springing to mind here is the idea of honor. The idea of honor is massive in the Brehon Law. I mean, if you broke your word, you lost your reputation, and then nobody would want to do business with you anymore. So your word was everything. And I think if we're doing trade and communication on an online digital world, this is something that it's going to be crucial. It's going to actually be crucial to a free society if there was no what we would call centralized regulation. There's a great guy online, Stefan Molyneux, and he's a libertarian, an anarchist, whichever way you want to look at it. And he has given a lot of thought to these ideas and the idea of how we could basically, instead of having centralized law agencies promulgating law on top of us, we could have sort of like insurance agencies, but not insurance. They would keep a record of people's reputation. Very much like how eBay works, very much like how Amazon works, and buyers give feedback. And if somebody has 99.9% good feedback, you're going to buy off them rather than the guy who has 40 or 50% good feedback. So, I mean, these concepts are already there. And for me, like the Brehon Law, really, it was more, I guess, it's more of a social idea. It's more of how we can interact with each other as individuals. As equals. So, you know, the respect and the reverence that was had for women under the Brehon Law is a really crucial thing, and a really crucial part of that system. And you also have the respect for knowledge, and how, you know, the more you contributed to society through your knowledge, or through your poetry, if you were an excellent poet or you were an excellent doctor, the higher your status was, the higher reputation you had, and therefore you would get compensated more if somebody offended you or had broken the law against you, and you're entitled to a higher fee. I mean, these are things that I think, if you are having an online decentralized network and a free society, these are going to be crucial to making sure that society functions. Because what it also does is, or fundamentally does, is it puts the responsibility in the user's hands.
Yes.
to create the good content, to maintain honor, to add value to their experiences, to their interactions with other people, without having to pay a taxman in the middle of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. It's one of the things that, especially when we've been, like I said before the podcast, when we've been, at the moment we are now, we're really kind of building N99. This is one of the debates we've had a lot of discussions with, and we've had a lot of hours spent with a lot of people and connecting with a lot of people to discuss all this. Because we're about to switch on a completely decentralized internet that's never happened before, and this is going to change everything, because suddenly, all the even to us who are kind of, like you said, on this free man thinking about things, and we're all kind of on the same sort of mindset, that you still have questions of, like, how is this going to actually function. And one of the things that we've been discussing for a while is what do we do. This is again one of the open questions that's right now, as kind of live in that moment, and the people who are discussing around this issue is like, what do you do about when you have a completely decentralized internet? What do you do about people coming in and just putting on, I don't know, beheading videos or vile stuff that most of us don't like? Now, we can't stop them, and the minute you step in to stop someone, it's like we were discussing earlier on, you're stepping onto someone else's sovereignty, and you're saying you can't do that, and now they've got the right to. This is like life itself. I mean, whether it's way back, if somebody wanted to open up a big hole and stick all his shit into it, well, I mean, people would have to deal with that. Now, we've thought of the idea, how it's sort of cropped up in the discussions we've had is the idea, and I think it's a great analogy that the guy who's building it, Dally, he came up with the analogy. It says all we are is we're like a beach, and we're on a beach, and out there is there's riptides and there's currents, and all we do is we put a flag up there and say, look, don't go near them. If you want to go diving into the currents, that's your choice. All we can do is flag things up. Now, is this something was this kind of something that would have almost in the principle would have been this? Is this kind of related into what you were discussing earlier on with the idea that if you did something, to agree with someone in under the Brehon Law, that the people around them would flag them up and say, look, this is what this person's done. They'd bring in a grievance, and then and that's the case. Now, and again, this is kind of this is synergy to what we've been discussing. What do you do about people who just blatantly? Now, we talked about making them outlaws, but what would people do about who were to say, well, almost fuck you, I was going to carry on doing what I'm doing? What was the answer? The solution back then. Say someone didn't want to become an outlaw, and they said, "No, I'm staying here, and this is my property, and I don't care what you lot think." And we're just belligerent. I mean, it's the same live question what we're going to do now, because someone could come on and go, "Well, I'm just going to put a channel up and just going to put beheadings on it." We can't stop them. So again, what kind of wisdom can we learn from the Brehon Law, how they dealt with that?
I mean, you might not like the answer, but again, it's an honest answer. That we're dealing again with the forces of nature, and in nature, I mean, if it was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So I mean, the rightful revenge was to the family who lost their kin member, and if the person wasn't forthcoming with remedy, that was what the final answer would be. I mean, this is why the law, that's what the law was there for. The law was there to provide a civil alternative, a civilized alternative to blood feuds and, a life and eye, tooth for a tooth. That's what made them civilized. And if somebody had lost a member of their family through murder, the victim family was entitled to take a life from the other family, fundamentally. But they would appeal to the law for restitution, and that person who had caused the offence would usually be given over as a bond to them, and they'd have to work to repay the loss of that they'd given to the family. I mean, at the end of the day, we have been using force in society, and we justify that force. We give it to the government to use that force. I think that if we're being honest with each other, there will always be a need for force, but it's how that force is used. Is that force justified? Is it legitimate? And I think if you have standards of community, I mean, like, I know what you're getting at. It's like, how are you going to deal with pedophiles? How are you going to deal with serial killers? How are you going to deal with the really messed up people in society? And at the end of the day, society, tribes have a right to protect themselves against those sorts of people. That's always as it's been. And I mean, I'm finding it hard to talk about this because I can feel like the societal conditioning against that way of thinking. But can you provide a logical argument against that? I mean, the only alternative is that we give our power away to psychopaths to decide what to do. So, I mean, see, I don't know if that answers your question, but again, I don't have all the answers.
No, no. No. I think you're right. These are difficult areas to discuss, and I personally think, and I think it's again when you touched upon it when you mentioned it earlier on about how, it's almost maybe from the past they didn't have all the wisdom we do, as in the ability of technology. What it's technology has really illuminated the human. That's why I say it's great days, because I wouldn't really want to live 100 years ago, because technology has illuminated us. It's given us views of the galaxy. It's just given us great knowledge about certain things. But one of the things that you were saying earlier on, I think really sort of synchronized with what I was going to, and I wanted to sort of touch upon it, was you were sort of saying even in the case of a murder, that the restitution was done with the family and directly then. And I think I think this is, as much as I don't know about the future, but I think what will happen I think once more people connect, and what I think the future will be, we will understand, and I think we'll have more and more understanding about what is actually going on inside this skull of ours. Because, as we know, so let's take something like murder. I mean, percentage of murders that are done in the heat of the moment, and then, like we said again, people are thrown in cages for 20, 30 years, and it was done in the heat of the moment. But all this, and even the people who aren't, like I said, the child, the paedophilia and all that, there's a mental condition going on. You know what I mean? They've either been, which is what it is. A lot of the abuse goes on in this world, and just the harm that one person has to another. It's basically because of how they've been brought up. I mean, we as a society have this is what I think we're going to be judged for terribly in the future, will be how we brought up our kids, the way that we still hit children, the way that we treat children, the way that we basically just had this whole. I think they're going to judge us awfully for it, because I think that a lot of.
We justify violence. We teach them that violence is okay to solve your problems. That's when we hit children. That's what we're essentially saying.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens is this what I'm saying. And what happens is you one generation breeds another generation. Before you've got 3 or 4 generations down the line, and it's a whirlpool of deprivation these people go through, and it's hard for them to break that conditioning. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think in the future, I think when we have more connections between people, I think we're better. We can deal with these people at a much higher level. And I just think whether it takes 1 generation, whether it takes 10 generations, I don't care. Somewhere in the future, we are going to basically become more enlightened about how we treat other human beings, and then we will change as a species. Because I'm a real advocate of this, because I think as much as there are a percentage of people who are just wired wrong on this planet, and that's why they are like they are, and we can do something about that. Technology will come along. A lot of the conditions of where we are right now is just down to how we treat other human beings. And if everybody, as you said, just had the natural law of, look, you don't harm me, I don't harm you. I myself, like you said, my head is my government, my people. I'm quite happy, and I've got no right to invade your territory and all the rest. If we all just live like that, we'll be fine. And the thing is, and this is, I think the wake up moment goes is, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think society in general does work like that. That's why we don't harm people around us. We don't go and, when we're hungry, we don't go and steal from next door. We as human beings are almost, it's part of who we are as a species, to sort of like look after people around us. And this will always be shown here, because this is one of my answers to when people say, oh, but if there's no laws and all this, what's going to happen? I say to them, okay, when there's the worst of human situations, like when there's a stampede at a football ground, or you see a bomb goes off or somewhere, what happens? Do people go to the worst of their element, or they don't? They stop, they help each other, they want to, this is what you saw in the 9/11 attacks. You see it all over the world. People are instinctively going to help other human beings, and this is what I'm saying. I think we're already living that. I just think it's the wake up moment of, I think that most people have to either do go through or don't go through, when they realize of, like, well, we're all living like this. But at the top, there's these people that are just creaming our lives, our money, and
Yeah.
everything. And it's now that we're starting to see a whole breakaway where people are just going to go, well, we don't need to indulge in all that money and where that money goes. And it's this is where I sort of think it is. And
Yeah, it's time for change. Absolutely.
I mean, again, I think it's one of the fascinating things that, again, I know you touch upon it a lot, and I know I've listened to enough, quite a few Tir Na Saor ones. I know you talk about it as well. Was basically the whole. Again, this is why I think this is going to change everything. Is what the understanding of what money is and what that's done, and fiat money, and this is where we're entering right now, where people have got the opportunities, and we've seen it already for maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years with Bitcoin, that people are starting to do things peer to peer through themselves, taking away themselves from that whole. And this is what I'm trying to say. And I know you have I'm sure you have, you've got your own opinions about this, but the reason the like I say, the English common law and the states, like we have this English, and we divide ourselves and we call ourselves the United Kingdom and all this sort of stuff, and then Europe and stuff, they're all functioning because of this fiat money. And people don't understand what that means. And I know, and I'm sure it's something that, you in your everyday life, you're having the same friction as I do, that people don't even understand what money is, where it comes from, even at the fact, people just think it's like at the moment, this whole, in particular, and I don't want to get too parochial about politics, but there's a whole, as you see over here, I'm in the SNP, and they've got the Corbyn. There's this idea of like, oh, we can take loads of money from those people, we can give it up there, we can equal society out, and they don't understand what money is. They don't understand that all money is being stolen from people with laws, because they've got the power to, because they've written in laws to say, like you said, and this goes right back to, like you said earlier on, when you said this goes right back to when he's just taking a penny from every little
Exactly.
This is old stuff,
Yeah.
man. It's just basically people coming in and stealing things, and this is where they do it to us right now. They don't come in and steal, and give us come in with guns and big jackets and stuff like that. But every time anybody's getting paid, they're taking it at a source. They're taking this is something that again, I wanted to tap into this. This all melds into one, but it's one of the things that not many people over here are generally aware of, but it's how, like, what the Irish Water are doing with the Irish people at the moment, stealing money at source, man. It's just barbaric, and I think this is where we are right now. We're about to enter a world. We're starting to see it around us where we can separate ourselves from money, and I don't think people realise how much money is an illusion until. Again, like, I don't know how many people are aware, but Ireland was just crippled by all this, and do you know what I mean? And I think that's where maybe we look to people like Ireland, because you've lived under stuff, and people over here think, oh, well, it never happened to England. Then you just go look at the debt that England had got, and see how much it could all just crumble like that. And I think this is what's going to happen. This is why I will fly the flag, because I do think that the whole thing's just going to collapse, and it won't collapse over 10 years. It'll collapse in an instant. All, as you would know, all great empires like the Romans, they all fell overnight.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, there's a few things popped into my head there. One of the things, how you're talking about having a society where we can live with one another, and that's why earlier on I pointed out, I stressed that when you're born, you're absolutely free, but you're also absolutely dependent. We will always be dependent. And this is why we don't harm one another, because we know deep down it's for the benefit of the survival of the species that we don't harm each other. So we're generally nice to each other, and we will depend on each other. We will need to depend on each other. And that's important. There's also that, coming back to not having all the answers and what needs to change. I mean, the big cities and so on, all we're responsible is for that. We're only responsible for changing this, and so that's where it ends. And then trying to plant seeds in the conversations that we have with people, and how we actually live our lives, not just talking about it, but actually, walking the walk as well. Planting the seeds. And I don't know if this is the saying that you have over there, but it's planting the trees. Even though we might not sit in their shade, our children will sit in their shade tomorrow. We might not get to enjoy them. We might not see the world that we're talking about, but that's no reason or no excuse not to do something about it now. And there's a quick, if you don't mind, there's a quick paragraph that I wanted to read out of a book here, Classical Liberalism, because I think it explains. It'll explain a lot of what we've been talking about, and it's about spontaneous order. The idea that that a group of people can get together and think and plan out the way society is going to be, or to plan out how the internet should be, is always going to be flawed, because all of our best creations of man have come out of spontaneous order. So you may think that a large and complex society needs a large and powerful government to run it, but classical liberals would dispute this. They believe that government is not the basis of social order. The complex social institutions that we see around us are largely unplanned. They are the result of human action, but not of human design. For example, no central authority or conscious planning was needed to produce language, or our customs and culture, or markets for goods and services. Such institutions simply grow and evolve out of the countless interactions between free people. If over the centuries they prove useful and beneficial, they persist. If not, they change or are abandoned. Last bit, the Austrian social theorist F.A. Hayek called the result spontaneous order. Spontaneous orders can be hugely complex. They evolve through individuals following rules of conduct, like the rules of grammar, that they might not even realize that they are following, and could scarcely describe them. It is the height of folly in politicians and officials to presume that any single mind could comprehend such complex orders, never mind improve on them. And now we have money. Money as a medium of exchange is not a bad thing, and never has been. I mean, we've always had a medium of exchange, whether it was goods for goods in trade and barter, whether we represented those goods in gold, sometimes it was seashells. For hundreds of years in England, the system was a tally stick. There's nothing wrong with having a system of accounting that measures exchanges between people. That's fine. It's not even essential that that medium of exchange has value itself. It doesn't have to be gold. It doesn't have to be silver. It just has to be something that we agree upon, that we can exchange with each other, that represents a value of certain goods and services. What becomes a problem is when regulation steps in. When bank regulation steps in and government regulation steps in, and they say, oh, you're not allowed to use your own tokens of exchange, you have to use our tokens of exchange, which is what you said, fiat currency. Fiat is a Latin word which means by decree. So by government decree, this is legal tender, this is the only thing that you can exchange, and this is what's going to represent the value of goods. Even that wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that they print this stuff like you know, no end, and then we're still bound by this. So it doesn't actually represent any value. This is why inflation and deflation exists. So I mean, if you could get this mediator, this regulator, this centralized control of what is essentially governed by interactions between free people, you and I agreeing to exchange value. If you can get the middleman out of the picture, then the market will flourish, freedom will flourish, ideas will flourish. Regulation stifles innovation. Regulation stifles creation. What we can come up with, what we can conceive, is shut down again and again, whether by our local government, with them stopping people from selling allotment food. Have you heard this in the UK? They're stopping people from selling allotment food. That's your local government. You can have your national government regulating how and what countries we can do business with as individuals. And then you have the European Union telling us, you know, what companies can merge with what companies, or who can do business with who, and who can move where, and all of this sort of stuff. So on every level, you have regulation, control, manipulation among people who do not have even all of them combined minds. Very, you know, educated people coming from wealthy backgrounds, they had the best of everything. All of those minds combined can still not come up with the answers to solve these problems of society, because the answers are solved spontaneously via the interactions that we have. That's how they're solved. In the moment, when two minds can come together and move fluidly with the circumstances, and not wait for regulation to come down and go, well, we've done 3 years of research into this now, and we've debated about it for another 2 years, and we're finally going to put this thing into law, which they have no qualification, or they don't have the mental capacity to understand all the intricacies that law is going to affect. So again and again, the conclusion I have to come back to is this concept of the state, aside from it being fictional anyway, that's another story. being imaginary. I mean, touch it, bring it into court, bring it tested under scientific circumstances. You can't. It's just an idea. This is the poison of society. And people would say, well, religion is the poison of society. And religion is religion. People say religion caused all the wars. I'd say no. I say religion gave the reason to go to war, but it was states that allowed for massive amounts of people to mobilize, for the mobilization of resources, for massive military industrial complexes to grow up. You need a state to do that. If it's just religious cults and sects and denominations fighting amongst themselves, which did happen, I'd call that a battle. Okay, I'd call it a skirmish. But for the massive amounts of bloodshed that this world, this species has experienced, even in the last century alone, can only happen through the use of a state and this new religion of nationalism.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I said, my man. This is why I think it is the epoch moment we're going to go through, because I don't think that, you know, I relate this to the printing press. You know what I mean? Where we are right now, you know, in my lifetime, and this is, you know, my lifetime, the last 20 years, you know, I've seen the rise of the internet. You know, going from something that I thought back in the 90s would be the game changer, but then exactly what you just said, you know, regulation, they started to you know, take something that was just completely peer-to-peer, and, you know, one person connecting to another person and exchanging ideas and information and whatever it may be, and they started to put regulation in it, and more regulation and more regulation, to the point where we got now. And I don't know how many people are aware of where we are right now, how much Facebook are watching everything you say and manipulating it just so they can do an algorithm to work out how people react to certain information and news. You know, this is why I'm saying it's the epoch moment, because it's not there yet, but, you know, we've seen a few things around it. But, you know, in a few months' time, I don't want to sort of, again, I'm not here to sort of be the auditor of the Safe Network, but, you know, in a few months' time, you know, there is going to be the ability, and it is that epoch moment where we can, for the first time ever as humans, have a completely decentralized network where nobody can get between us, no middlemen. No, we can completely decide things, you know, peer to peer, and I think, you know, there's two ways of looking at things. We can, there's a negative side, and that's why I use a Slack, the hashtag, and then I use it all the time, slay positive, because I think there's two sides. It can be a negative word, and don't get me wrong, man, I'm a realist. I look at the world and I think, especially when we look around Europe, I think we're slipping into fascism on a daily basis. I think that, you know, there's wars and rumors of wars, and, you know, there's these states that just, because they know that money is just drying up. It's almost like the ball of money and debt is just rolling down the corridor, and they're in front of that ball, and they're running in front of it, and they're just pushing everyone out their way and grabbing as much as they can before they know the whole thing collapses. And this is where the days I think we are right now, which reminds me of the fascism that went on in the 30s and, you know, around them, because it's a very, how do you distract the masses ultimately? You send them to war. You give them a set of people over there to hate. And now, this is, like I said, that's all been allowed to happen because of these states can come and, like we were discussing, they've got the ability to at a point take our money, which then funds their distractions or whatever it may be, whether it's war or whatever it may be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here we are right now, like it was. This is why I said it's like the printing press days, because it reminds me of the, you know, it's, you know, 500, 600 years ago, you know, everything was completely under the auspices of the church, you know, everything, you know, the fact that stuff to be written had to be done by a cleric, by hand, who, you know, and he had to have certain training, which would take years. Yeah. And, you know, and all the crap that went along with that, you know, all the, you know, basically central control at the highest form sent from Italy itself. And then along came, you know, the printing press, and great. And people, first of all, saw it as just, oh, great, it's some way of disseminating information. But man, that led to the Reformation. And beyond that, it led to the printing press. It made more people could have information direct, not only about the Bible, but about everything, and how it changed people's mindsets, and it flourished which was what we look back now and we call it the Renaissance. And what was that from? From a simple, just people just having one bit of understanding, one bit of technology, using that to connect more people, and before you know it, changed everything. And this is where I think we are right now. I think we're going to get to the point, and I'm very interested to see how, you know, what because you know, obviously people like yourselves and what you're doing with Tir Na Saor, and you're doing the Law Academy, and you know, Students for Liberty. You're obviously very aware of the issues we're talking about like that. So, you know, I don't know how much you're aware of you know, in your wider circles. I know you mean you've talked about it a long time, but of the safe network and what that is going to do to and give the freedom to people who think like us, who are like-minded. I mean, is that word starting to spread out? Because I think it needs to be. If it's not, it needs to be getting out to as many people as possible, saying that very soon you're going to have the ability just to walk away and basically let's try the live experiment. Let's try doing this, you know, in people to people. It's all, you know, let's walk away and build a new life. And like you said, you know, we may plant the seeds and we may never see it in our lifetime. I'm very optimistic. I think we will, because I think like
I'm honestly optimistic about it, but I do say that quite often. I think it's the pragmatic view, but I do think that we might just.
The way I look at it, my friend, and this is how I look at it, you know, and it's one of the things that I, again, is a sort of it's a very clear, concise point to make this very point, is that a kid now in Africa, say, you know, I don't know, Sudan, or I don't know, the middle of the Congo, if he's got a smartphone, he's got more information at the tip of his fingers than Clinton had when he was in power as the, you know, US president.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it, yeah.
You know, this is what I'm saying. When you give humans the ability to have information, and then all what's missing right now is just the ability to connect. I mean, this is one of the things I think right now where things like the safe network, and you know, you're seeing with Bitcoin and other things, and decentralization, it's all very well and good in the first world, but and as you know, people, and you were saying earlier on, you studied other law systems, and you must know about how this really affects a lot of people in other parts of the world, because they can't have the freedom to, their internet is being watched even more than ours, and they haven't got the ability to connect and share information. And when you give people the ability to do that, and not only is trade going to, you know, expand and like you said, flourish, because we've got the ability to do it between ourselves, the ability for people to connect and therefore share information and having, you know, is going to change everything. I mean, one of the things I've flown the flag for, and I'm definitely trying to, you know, I want on their 99 on the Safer Network, definitely, is a whistleblower channel where people can know that without anybody, you know, knowing who they are or any sense can stand up and say, look, this is what's going on, and release some facts and bring this, you know, because right now, as we know, I mean, I again tapped into what I was trying to say. There's issues like the Irish water, or what's going on with the NHS hospitals over here, where people are afraid to whistleblow because it costs them their jobs and their income. So again, I know it's just sort of, I've rambled on a bit there, but the two main ones I'd love to hear your, you know, how, you know, your thoughts on was basically about the whole idea of how you think that the decentralized internet would change the world, and again, how much sort of traction is it gaining amongst sort of like the community you used around.
The honest answer to that one is when it, like, you know, I have a kind of a niche that I focus on, and I trust that there's people looking at other niches like yourself. And what I did, so I don't focus a lot on the technological side of things. I mean, I know about Bitcoin, but not enough about it. You know, I need to kind of brush up on that. And I was only speaking to my friends in the Libertarian Ireland today, and they were giving me, you know, pointers on how to get started. But when I spoke to them about coming onto this show, and I mentioned the MaidSafe, they had all heard about it. And another friend of mine, Wayne, he was only speaking to my brother about it last week. He told me when I told him I was coming onto this show. So other people have said it to me, and they're very interested in it, and they think it's something that they're keeping an eye on, but it's something that I haven't really got my head around myself, you know.
Well, to be honest, my friend, I've been kind of like balls deep in it for a year, and I still haven't got my head around it fully. So there's no shame in what you're saying there, my man. Because this is the point. I mean, I think the thing that inspires me most, and I'm again, I don't. What inspires me most is one that, you know, I has from day one, is that this is all being built by some. You know, again, people can go on YouTube and just do as much research. But David, and you know, particularly the guy who's the architect, says he's the most down-to-earth, normal, free-loving Scot you've ever met in your life. And you know, just going to when I went down to see them, you know, when they're based in Troon, and just to walk into a building that was completely amongst there, you saw it in live, people were completely decentralized. system. There was no that I'm the leader, I'm the everyone
Yeah,
was just there, and it was so inspiring. And I thought, wow, I've like I said, I mean, I kind of been on the technological one for a while, and I don't understand it fully. But when it was like, okay, so I get all the concepts, so we can all just communicate through like we are doing now. Because this conversation was, we could have had this 10 years ago, and it's through this sharing of information that we advance
yeah,
as human beings. But when it's all well and good knowing all that in theory. But when I went to that room for the first time, and I saw 30 people all sitting there under this decentralized system, all just getting along, all inspiring each other, all every opinion was allowed to have. There was no people storming off. There was disagreements. All discussions were open, and I thought, this is a glimpse of the future. In the future, this is how everything's going to happen. Then you compare it to the world we live in right now, when you see these points of central control of failure everywhere, whether it's council leaders or everything. And this is what I'm saying, it ties into this whole thing. And I get again, the Irish water thing again. It's this whole idea of central systems of ruin something that's ours as a commonwealth of humanity. They don't own the water, it's not theirs, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But I see, like, with the Irish water issue, I count myself lucky in a way that because I kind of got active and aware of these things very young. And so Tir Na Saor, when that was made, I was only 22, so I've been very privileged in that I've got to watch the changes happen in Ireland from an early stage, and to see what's happening now with the movement, the protest movement. It is very inspiring, and it's nothing that I've ever seen in my lifetime before. And all the relatives say that's the biggest movement that they've seen. It's been sort of like the water has been the catalyst for this, but you speak to any people on the street and they'll tell you that it's not about the water. It's more than that. They're thinking of the bigger picture. What's also interesting is you can speak to these people about these sort of concepts that we're talking about. I mean, you can speak to them about, they'll bring it up to you now. They'll talk to you about how the fractional reserve is ruining the world. Or they'll talk to you about corruption in government. They'll talk to you about how the legal system is defunct. So this is the evolution. This is a happening. This is us changing how we view society, changing how we view ourselves and our relationship to one another. I think, again, what's happening, especially what I observe, it is a personal observation among the older generations, is that it's like a dialogue it's like a one dialogue they have in their head with regards to like how the solutions that they see are solutions that I would say would continue the problem, such as electing a new government, voting in new politicians, changing the laws to do such and such. I mean, I think that these are old solutions to the problems that we need. We need new remedies for a better world. So this is something that, again, where I feel the work of Tir Na Saor has been very helpful in promoting these ideas of personal freedom, self-education, learning the law, things like that. But also the Brehon Law Academy will be very useful as well, because it has that cultural aspect of it, to say to people that the better world that we're working for existed before. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. What we can do is we can just listen to the wisdom of our elders, the wisdom of our ancestors that are still here, written in stone and written on manuscripts. We can listen to this for guidance going forward into the future. And then with Students for Liberty, it's, Students for Liberty is articulating the very logical arguments against statism and for, shall I say, a freer society. It's more an argument for a freer society rather than against statism, because at the end of the day, that speaks for itself. And so what I feel I can do at the moment in my limited capacity as a man with limited resources is to speak about this and to promote this as much as I can on the internet, and to hosting events and so on, to try and communicate a framework that people can relate to, that's alternative to what they're thinking, like an alternative solution. And that's I think that's all I can do at this moment. It's just trying to plant those seeds in a little way I can. So I mean, so on one hand, it is excellent. It's so inspiring to see what's happening. On the other hand, sometimes I feel like I'm banging my head off a wall. But like, I'm optimistic that we're going to see a better Ireland. We're going to see a better world in our lifetime, because, you know, there's no other choice. There's no other choice. We have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the and that's why I think about this a lot at the moment, and I was thinking about this the other day. I think there's a great synergy, like I've been trying to sort of like emphasising a lot in this podcast, between about the people who you the audience, and the people that surround you and you're working with, and what's going on with what we're doing generally. Because these, I mean, I'm sure, but when you have when you get to the mindset of, like, what you're talking about, you want. It can very easy to get very frustrated and think, well, I know all this, but how can I do things? Well, okay, well, great. I know the system's corrupt. I know that, but how can I step away? And this is it now. I mean, there is a solution coming where we can all step away. We can start to do this, and we can start to, like, break ourselves away from I say before, we've had the separation of the state and religion in theory, and now we can separate the state and money for once and for all, and we can.
I think I just add, and I've said this before, what is that same analogy, but we should have separation of state and everything.
Yes,
the state and church. Religion is private. Keep your religion private. Go and worship in your churches, and everybody should be free to practice their religion whichever way they want. But the state, as a religion, as a belief system, an ideology, a dogma that people are going to put their hand on their heart and die for, a flag, a rag on a stick, that needs to go.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm saying. That's why I fly the flag for the Safe Network, because I think this is the first ability we've got with what we've got, the connections we've got right now, where we can do this with no control. No one, no middlemen, no, we can all connect, we can all and come up with solutions. This is one of the things I said. It was so it's such a perfect way you said it, and I'm often saying it. I don't know what the future is going to bring, but do you know what I mean? I'd rather have the people who are shaping this new world to be the free-minded people, and that's why I want to spread the word to these people, because it's like, it's the analogy I say. It's like, we are literally building a new world, and it's kind of like, okay, look, we're all leaving the boats of one land and saying, look, over there's a new continent. Look, some of us have already landed there, and they've already built this stuff up there. Get yourself across, and we can build this new world. We don't have to live under and history's taught us that's what people have done. People, as you know, I mean, the Irish particularly, man. I mean, how many of the Irish are just disseminated literally around this globe because of oppression for one reason or another? It's what we do, and this is the tool we've got right now. This is our solution in 2015. We've got a solution going, well, we don't have to move houses, but we can move off their paradigm. We can move away from their internet. We can move away from their money. We can move away from their mind control. We can move away from everything.
And by doing this, the state will cease to be, because it exists because we depend on it, because it has a purpose. Its purpose is to provide what it provides at the moment. So once we begin relying on each other, and once we begin, from a Brehon Law point of view, settling our disputes as equals, as honourable men amongst each other, the government as an entity becomes redundant. The courts as an entity become redundant. The banking system as an entity becomes redundant, because we don't use them anymore. We have found a better way to live. And my friends have given the analogy of, if you can imagine a big room with lots of tables and different people sitting at these tables. The table that's having the most fun, the table that's laughing the most, people are gradually going to radiate over to that table, and that table is going to eventually have the most people on it, and eventually everybody on it. I guess where people like yourself with the Made Safe technology, and seeing this future coming into view, like our role is, I guess, like setting up those buildings, setting up the shacks, metaphorically speaking, setting up the infrastructure, and paving the way for this to come true, or as I've heard it being called before, shovel the shit out of the way, and start walking that path. And then we'll make mistakes. We will make mistakes, but there'll be our mistakes, and we'll learn from them and we'll grow from them. And this is as nature intended.
Yeah, well, and that's, I mean, it's the dual sides of this, and I think, I mean, I think not only is it really optimistic that this is happening, and I think it's, like I say, I think it's really the greatest of days, and it is an epoch moment. But I think it's going to be like everything else, and again, it's the dual sides to this. This system, what we live in, whether you like it, whether you're the biggest fan of it, and you think you can change it from within, or by getting another puppet in, and he'll change it, or whatever. That's, even if you believed all that, it's going to collapse. The whole thing is going to collapse because it's an antiquated, rundown system. And I mean, it's one of the things, I mean, you tapped into it earlier on. I mean, the idea that we still live in 2015, and once every 5 years I go to a bit of paper, I can put a cross on it, put it in a box, and that's going to represent somebody who's going to go down to a building in London.
Freedom.
And you know, the ridiculous thing about this, and I think most people, even we had an election over here, realize it's like, you vote even if you do believe in all that. And I know you've got to remember in mind, a lot of people that they've been brainwashed with this crap, and they think it's all relevant and it means something. It's like, your vote, even if I put my cross in here, I know the SNP are going to win it. Doesn't matter. It's absolutely irrelevant, and that's what I mean. It's old, and the whole thing is clunky. There's so many things around now that are clunky. That technology, like everything, will come along and give solutions, and that happens. And this is what I think one of the I always sort of say it to people. You know, the reason we've gone from, like I said, I use that example of, you know, the kid in Africa has now got the ability and the same knowledge that Clinton had when he was back on. This has come from an industry that's never been regulated. I mean, the phone industry, all these industries, the reason they've gone at such speed is because everyone's just left them alone. You know, other industries where the government and state regulations is, and it's all clunky to a stop. The one that hasn't happened, look we've happened in 20 years. And okay, great. And as we said before, you know, now they're trying to come in and they're trying to regulate it, and there's 2-speed internets going on, and, you know, man, and we can, YouTube are pulling videos, and we know what's going on right now. But, you know, just in this antiquated, crappy system we've got right now, look how far we've come in 20 years because of no regulation. So imagine what it's going to be like when we switch on something that's completely deregulated. It's going to, and that's what I mean. I think the duality is great. There's a whole new world coming, but equally, the system as it is going to collapse because, like I said, it's antiquated, and as we said, this whole illusion of money is just going to come crumbling right down on their between them. And I think people need to wake up to that stuff. And I think, I mean, maybe I'm talking to, you know, and I know a lot of people, you know, in the UK are listening to this right now, and you constantly go over here like, oh, well, it's never going to happen to us. And I think, man, I've been, you know, as you know, even where I sit right now, I could almost swim to Ireland. And I think you're just a little bit of water away, and look what you lot went through, man. And you know what I mean? It's inevitable. The whole lot is going to come crashing down. And this is why it's imperative to tell people, because it's very optimistic on one side, but on the other side, it's like saying to people, well, okay, great, come and join us on the other island, but do you know what? This island you're living on right now, it's going to flood. It's going to be under a drought, whatever it is. It's buggered, man. You need to move away, and it's important that you do. And I know people around you are aware of that, and that's why I think it's the synergy moment, because it's sort of getting frustrated and thinking, oh great, I want to live this island, there's nothing I can do, which it's been like that movie for the last 20 years. Right now there's lifeboats and there's boats being built, and this is where we stand right now, just to wave the flag, hold that torch alight, and say, look, come across, because as you know, and again, I mean, you could talk about it from your angle and what you know, but the system is inevitable to collapse. The money will come crumbling. It's like ashes in their hands. It's like you said, it is.
And this is a terrifying idea, but it's also, this is the liberation, because there's creation and destruction. Whatever comes next is going to be something new, and that's the creation aspect of it. And I mean, it's only when the obstacles to human creative expression are removed will we discover what we can become. That's why we have to say we don't know what's going to come next, because it's only once those things are removed do we have the potential to flourish, the potential to grow and learn and find out what we can be, to reach you know, greater and greater heights of human expression and human experience. Life should be a joy, every moment of it. I mean, you look at the animals and how they live in nature, and it's like not a care in the world. I mean, life should be something that is felt in the heart. So we must laugh every day, create new music, and just, you know, spend time with the people we love, and, you know, create new things. That's what we're here for, and enjoy the ride. And it's not that we're only going to be able to do that when the obstacles to human creative expression are removed.
Yeah, man, it's what I'm saying. I mean, it's one of my I envision today, and again, I just chuck the seed out there, and I hope somebody will build it. And I'm sure it will come. I want somebody to build a Babel app, the ability where, you know, anybody from any language can go onto a screen like we're doing right now, and in real time we'll be able to see someone else's face and instantly understand what they're saying. Because if we can just unify that, and how we, you know, what I mean, we're divided by language even, and if I just hope these are new things that I think will happen. Because, and I said, I think one of the fears I have about the future, and I don't know how you feel about just generally about, and I think I just sit around that right now, and I think it's something that's very kind of a theme for what you've been talking about, is keeping the human connection alive. Now, human connection doesn't need to be touch as much, but, you know, like this, the face-to-face meeting of people, not hiding behind masks or, you know, all that kind of thing, meeting the people and sharing ideas and concepts. That's what I mean. It's this human touch that I think it's missing a lot now, and I think it's going to be essential for where we as a species move on towards. Because, as I said, technology is going to keep rising on, and if we don't shape it, it's going to shape us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think where we're at now is a very crucial point in history. We're at a point now where anything is possible. The future is so uncertain that anything is possible, and that could be terrifying, or it can be, again, it can be liberating. We can embrace that. We can grab that by the horns and say anything is possible. And like that idea that you're saying there, I mean, I don't want to get too metaphysical, because we've been of the concepts we've been talking about. But I have this notion that if it exists in the mind, well, it exists. It starts there. So
Yes.
having the idea is the first thing. So unless it exists in the mind first, then there's no potential for it to come to be. So if it exists in the mind, it exists. If you can think it, you can make it happen.
Yeah, and that's what's really inspiring about. Again, this is one of the things that is some real clear differences, and maybe, you know, I kind of spend a lot of my world now in this whole, even this ethos of completely, you know, decentralized world. So the people, what I really inspires me on a daily basis is this whole idea. If you have an idea, people, not just me, anybody, have an idea. We're now living, we're about to enter a world where these ideas can be made into practice. You know, this is where, because of this human connection, there's no magic going on here right now. All you're doing is connecting human people who have got different areas of knowledge, and we can all collaborate, and any solution that you know, any problem you think of, that, you know, man, it can be built. And this is what's really inspiring, because it's, I said, this is, I think, almost as much as we're regressing ridiculously speed into the future, as a lot of our old humanity is coming back to us, a lot of the old empathy. And I think the more we go into the future, I think the more we're going to, it's almost funny. I thought like the other night, I was listening to one of your Tir Na Saors, and I was thinking, I wonder if the people that, you know, maybe from, you know, 1100, we're living in, you know, in Ireland at the time, as much as it would mind blow them, you know, to all the technology, all the advancements where we are right now, I wonder if they would actually sort of think, well, all you're doing is actually, with all the technology, you're just going to get back to a place where we are, where we understand, you know what I mean? We just almost go around a full circle, and, you know, as much as we've advanced with technology, we're still going to get back to the same mindset and the same set of rules as they lived under.
I think I know why that is. I think it's because as an animal species, we have unfailing desire to be free. So we will always move towards that point of freedom. No matter how harshly we're oppressed or for how long, we will desire to be free. And this disconnectedness that you talk of between human animals today, people today, is what I think of it as a domestication. We've been domesticated. Just the condition that we're living in today is not our natural state. And it's about, you know, the idea of sovereignty, personal sovereignty, or being a free man, or any of these concepts that we've been talking about, to me, is kind of like getting back in touch with your wild state, back in touch with your natural state, where you move where you want to move, you create, you think in the moment, you know, and this is where compassion comes from. this is where I think empathy comes from, and you know, because to me, empathy is having an understanding for somebody else's position in their suffering. And you can only come through that through having self-awareness and having, you know, introspection into yourself and the world that you're in. The realizing that your actions cause consequences, you know, and then owning those consequences regardless of them. I mean, if we have more and more people doing this, you know, as you say, we will get back to where we were 1,000 years ago.
Well, like I say, what I've you know, I can definitely, you know, vouch for in my life, and it's been a complete one. I've seen it over and over and over again. You know, it's the old Bill Hicks one. You know, we live in a world of sheeple, and people are almost afraid to stick their head above the parapet. Once you do, and you start saying that, you know, I've had it said to me countless times that say to me, "Oh, do you know what? I was thinking like you all the way through, but I was always afraid to say it or voice those opinions." And I say to people, never self-censorship. Because that's what a connection does to us all. We all realise we're all. No, that's what I'm saying. I think vast majority of us, and I've been around the world, man, and I've lived around the world. We're all thinking the same thing. Do you know what I mean? And it's only these divisions set up around us that want to stop us connecting. And this is why, this is why the system is going to collapse, because they can't hold back this connection that's going on. And more people do connect. I mean, man, I grew up in I said this to you before. We talked about this before, but man, I grew up in an age in the 80s, been growing up in England, where I was just taught instinctively to hate Irish people. Now you couldn't get away with that now, because everybody knows somebody who's Irish. Everybody knows somebody's from Congo. Everybody knows somebody's from Australia. Everybody knows somebody's from Asia. You can't get away with saying them over there anymore. And this is, do you know what I mean? You can't get away with that anymore. And this is what I think we're going to see a great flourishing in mankind, because I think we're just, like I said, we're going to go back to where we were before. Like you say, we are all like-minded, and all that's happening now is that more and more people connecting and going, oh, wait a minute, why was I quiet for so long? It's that. It's you know what I mean, and I don't know. You see it a lot more. I from what I gather and listen to your you know, Tir Na Saor, and keeping an eye on as much as I can. I think there's a great awakening going on in Ireland at the moment, because of, like I said, because you've lived through the whole, you know, recession, all that crap that you lived through, and the Europe playing around with you. So there's almost like a whole island of fertile minds and stuff like that. Now, how aware are people around you? Obviously, when you're talking about the Brehon Law and stuff like that, you know, I mean, to the average person, when you're going out into the pub or you go to the nearest town or whatever, how many people are aware of the Brehon Law? I mean, is it something that's quite, you know, instinctively held? You know, is it, what I'm trying to say is it as much as it maybe not taught? Is it passed down through word of mouth, through families? Is it kind of?
Let me. I can answer that in two ways, and I'll give you a couple of examples as well. Unfortunately, majority of the people only know about the Brehon Law in name. Well, maybe let me rephrase that. Some people know about the Brehon Law in name. Lots of people have never even heard of it, ever. And that's a tragedy, because I often say that it's like not knowing that you had a language. That's how significant it was to those people, our ancestors. It was like a part of their day-to-day. It was fused with their spirituality, with their language. Everything was like a synthesized worldview that was centered around justice. So majority of the people, unfortunately, don't know about it. There are circles of people who do know about it, and that's a good thing. And there's the dialogue is happening. And I mean, just last May, I was speaking at the Festival of the Fires. The Festival of the Fires is an ancient Irish festival that was stopped around, well, it was after the coming of St. Patrick. So it was stopped, I think, for about 1,500 years. And that's been revived now in the last 10 years in Ireland, and people are going to that. And the sort of people who would go to that would be very aware of the Brehon Law, maybe not the intricacies, but that it was a better legal system and so on. What I observe, though, is that even though people don't have the knowledge of it, I mean, the actual working knowledge about them, you can recognize it in the nature of the Irish people. You can recognize it in what makes the Irish Irish. For example, all around the world, the Irish have a reputation as being very hospitable and being very friendly, and the island of 1,000 welcomes, Céad Míle Fáilte go Héireann. So this is because you could say that it was illegal not to be hospitable under the Brehon Law. It was actually part of the civil code, you know, that you couldn't turn away somebody from your door who knocked and needed help or wanted a glass of water or anything like that. So, you know, you can see, well, maybe that's where that has come from. Maybe that's a residual thing from the Brehon Law, that the Irish people are considered friendly and hospitable. There's another kind of better example than that. Under the Brehon Law, there is this idea that, first of all, the person who committed the offence was liable. But if that person was unknown, like say somebody was mugged and the offender was unknown at the time, or say a stranger came in from a different place and committed a crime, it became the responsibility of the whole community to compensate for that crime. They became the sort of the defendant. It was the honor of the community. So they all kind of had to chip in a small, very small amount. If it was like 100 or 200 or whatever amount of people chipping in, it's going to be a small amount. But it was the honor of the community that was at stake. And then what this creates is an incentive automatically in the mind of the people in that community to bring offenders to justice. If you happen to know, even if it was your cousin or your brother that did that offense, you would bring him to justice, because it was in the interest of the whole community that he was brought to justice. And it was in his interest as well, because only that way could he learn and grow from his mistake. So with that in mind, there was a couple of years ago in Dublin, there was a match, I believe it was Austria versus Ireland. And some Austrian fans, a couple, they were visiting the Guinness factory, and as they were leaving, they got mugged. And nobody knew who the offender was. They mugged them and ran away. And when the League of Ireland fans found out about this, the Irish fans, the supporters club found out about this, they automatically gut reaction. They did a whip around among all the fans, and they got the money back for these people that had been robbed, and they appealed to the Football Association of Ireland for tickets. They got them tickets. And any of the money that was left over then, which was quite a bit, because they just reimbursed them, they just gave them restitution, was then donated to charity. Nobody needed to tell those people to do that. It felt like the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do. And that's an example of the Brehon Law alive today in Ireland. And I would say in any culture, because I'm going to be biased about it, I'm going to say this, in any culture, when you see that act of fairness and justice, you can say that that is an example of the Brehon Law in action.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, a perfect kind of example of what I was just thinking when you just say that now. I mean, I go to a lot of football matches, and I'm a Leeds fan, and I've stood in the Cop, which is renowned around England as being like the Cop at Ellen Road. You know, it's gonna, that it's kind of, it's got this reputation sort of thing. And I've gone in there with my partner, and it's just exactly what you just said. I've witnessed it on so many occasions that I've seen, maybe an older gentleman, and he slipped, because they scored and he slipped, and everybody's just made a circle and picked him up and stuff like that. And if anybody's like shouting out, "Oi, darling," and all that, people go and, in the crowd will go up, and you don't need stewards, you don't need, this is what I'm saying. It's exactly what you just said. This example of this works everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to, obviously, there's a big relation. And again, I would urge anybody, because I think it's a fascinating thing. And I think, again, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I think we can only ever advance in life if we understand a bit about where we've come from and the momentum and where we come from, our roots and stuff like that. It's just a general history. Now, I would urge people to go and just learn about the Gaelic history, because I think it's fascinating. And one of the things that really really put a different spin onto me, and this is one of the connections I wanted to talk to you about, was when I was watching the kind of documentary about it, and they turned the whole globe around, so like all the islands around Scotland, and just looked at it from that point of view. So it was like just turn the whole map around, and you saw Ireland over there, and you saw these bunch of islands, and where all these Gaelic kingdoms and tribes were, and it was like, oh wow, you sort of saw that this was a really big Gaelic sort of tribe. Now the connection I wanted to know, that obviously, did the Brehon Law, did it have a sort of the same name and the same sort of influence in Scotland at the time?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm really glad you brought that up. But just to point out that what we call it the Brehon Law today, but they would never have referred to it as the Brehon Law. A Brehon it comes from the Irish for judge. It's Brehov is the Irish for judge. So the Brehovs were the keepers of the law of the people. They didn't make the law. They just studied it and remembered it, what the customs of the people were, and they were consulted for their wise judgment as a mediator, not a judge. Right, really, you know. So that's why we call it Brehon Law. It's kind of like the anglicized, what you could say, the anglicized terminology for it. But take Scotland, and I love this topic. The word Scotland, you're aware of the origin of this? Where Scotland?
It's the Scotia, isn't it? Which is to do with the myth, the story about the Greek prince and the princess who was a pharaoh and all that kind of. That's roughly why.
Yeah, like if you look at very, very early maps of Ireland, Ireland was Scotia. Ireland was named Scotia, and the people who lived on Ireland were called the Scoti, and they believed that Scotia was an Egyptian princess according to the Irish manuscripts, and the Scottish manuscripts as well say the same thing, and that they travelled. She was married to a king of Spain who was Militius of Spain, and the 5 sons of Mill and Scotia travelled to these islands and set up, a colony. And the legend tells us that they defeated the Tuatha De Danann, who were the god people who were living in Ireland beforehand. These are the people who became the fairies of legend, But I'm kind of going on a tangent here. Ireland was originally called Scotia, and there was a kingdom called Dalriada, the kingdom of Dalriada in North Antrim. And if you stand on the east coast of the north of the island on a very clear day, you can see Scotland across the water. And these people may not have had maps themselves, as we haven't found ancient Irish maps. So they would have seen that was just on the other side of a lake of sorts, and that it was the same land in that way because they could see it. And the kingdom of Dalriada spread from Ireland to the west of Scotland, and it encompassed that whole area. And the people that came were called the Scoti. So there was a point of time in history when Ireland was called Scotia Major, and Scotland was known as Scotia Minor, and it was seen as one colony. The people that were there as well were the Picts. And an interesting story with the Picts was that they had relations with the Irish the whole time, and there was an Irish high king who gave them 3 of his daughters in marriage on the condition that from then forth the monarch, the lineage of royals in the Pictish clan comes through the female line. So that's an interesting side. The Picts always, their royalty descended through the female line because it was Irish queens that were sent over to marry them. So basically, the Scotland, the law in Scotland would have been the exact same by those people because it was the same customs that had brought them over there. But in saying that, if you look at the Norse traditions, the Asatru and things like that, if you look at that's what I'm saying, all the legal systems that predate colonialism had these same ways of settling disputes and keepers of the law, the customs of the tribe, the family unit has liability for the clan. All of these principles were present throughout all of culture. So this is why the Brehon Law stands out. Even though Ireland has been invaded, and as you say, manuscripts, untold numbers of manuscripts and books have been destroyed, not just by the Anglo-Normans, but also by the Vikings before that. Even though that happened, we're so lucky in this country. This is how much our ancestors loved to write. They were such scribes that we still have lots and lots and lots of material. We've got tomes of manuscripts about the Brehon Law, which is more, we can boast more than any European nation from that ancient part of their history, because we weren't touched by Rome. The Irish people weren't touched by Rome. So when the Roman Empire fell and all of Europe kind of disintegrated into chaos, Ireland was fine. Ireland still flourished at that time. So we were very lucky in that sense that we have these manuscripts, and that's why the Brehon Law can be looked to for guidance. And I always stress guidance. We've talked about going back to 1,000 years, and that sounds like going back to a more primitive state, and it's not really the case. It's like looking back to how things were done 1,000 years to guide us and adapt those principles according to today's world in order to get into a better future.
Well, I again, you're touching upon something that I've long kind of I held this sort of thought process that, and again, I mean, we talk about 1,000 years, and I don't realize I don't think they're people would say, oh, they're backward and stuff like that, because I think 1,000 years in the blip of where we are as a humanity is nothing. And you've got to remember that all these cultures and stuff like that 12,000 years goes back as far back as we can do, and then suddenly everything sort of like there was obviously a meteor, a storm, or something here, so something melted or something happened. But a lot of wisdom, and this is the thing, when you look back at as we're doing more and more, we're starting to see these ancient structures all around the world. It's pretty clear that they had uses of technology or technology at the time that we haven't got right now. Do you know what I mean? Now, well, I'm not going to get into the whole alien stuff, because I don't think that's the case. I think humans are very smart and we could have come up with this stuff, but there's been parallel times. But what I'm trying to say is I think some of these knowledges would have been held orally, and it would have been come up in stuff like the Gallics and this stuff, because again, I've got holes in my knowledge, but as I understand it, were the manuscripts you're talking about, were they written in Gallic? And if so, how far back does Gallic go back as a language? Do we know the sort of roots of Gallic?
Well, that's another good question. I mean, this is the difficulty, I suppose, with the Brehon Law. Although we have all these manuscripts, there's very few people that can actually, fully understand them. I mean, a lot of it has been translated by scholars who came in the last 200 years, great men whose now work that we can look at and we can build upon and grow from. But there's still a lot of it that is untranslated. So Irish went through 3 stages. You've got Old Irish, Middle Irish, and then Modern Irish. And when you take one of our manuscripts, one of the most famous manuscripts, the Tir Na Saor, which in Irish would translate to the Great Ancient Code, or the Great Antiquity, Tir Na Saor. This was the civil code. This was a book of law, and how it was written. It would have been written originally. They didn't go into a lot of detail. I mean, they would have been books for law professors, and more so to remind them of principles, kind of written in bullet points. So you would have a text of Old Irish that would have been antiquated 1,000 years later when they were still making and writing laws, so that the scholars that we would still consider very ancient today were working with materials that were very ancient to them at that time. And then some of the words had become obsolete, had gone out of use, the meanings were obscured. So when you look at this Tir Na Saor manuscript, later commentators have come in and they've added glosses to it to kind of explain what they thought it meant. And then at another further later stage, other commentators have come in and added further commentary in the margins and so on. So, I mean, this is the kind of the problem that we're faced with in getting to the real details and the nitty-gritty of the Brehon Law. But what we do know is we can glean certain principles from what we've already seen, what we've already uncovered. We can glean certain principles that ran throughout society, and we have uncovered quite a lot. And, I hope to inspire through some of the work that I'm doing with the Brehon Law Academy, that this sort of, to be a passion for this sort of research again, and that Irish speakers will come forward who want to translate these manuscripts, and they can work with maybe historians and poets and have a cross-discipline sort of research into all of this, because we have so many treasures yet to uncover. It's really exciting to think that there's still lots left untranslated to uncover. But I guess that's part of the difficulty. I mean, I'm not fluent in Irish. I try to speak it. I try to learn it. You think about this: 12 years of being taught Irish in school, and nobody in the country can speak it. Something's gone wrong there. But so I'm kind of at a disadvantage when I'm approaching the Brehon Law and those manuscripts, because I can't go to the original materials. But thankfully, as I said, there's been great scholars who have come before and who have put their life work into translating this, and I mean their life work into doing some really, deep, difficult translations, so that they could present it then to people like today and later generations that can then look at this, and then we can grow from it.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of points I'd like to reply to that. I mean, like, again, I live just on the edge. I think probably where I live is the last place in Scotland, because I think more south you go from where I am, you just see everything in English. But right now, where my train station is and all the road signs, it's Gaelic first, then English. So they're really pushing for, you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. So there's obviously, I think it's really good, because I think that any of these old languages and stuff like that, I think they're good to learn, because I think not only as I've learned when I've learned another language, is that when you learn another language, it's not just you're learning, different words for the same objects, or trees and all that kind of stuff. It's a different poetry and a different vibe and a different, puts you in a different kind of mindset to how you see things. They're far more lyrical, and I don't know any Gaelic at all. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I can speak any Gaelic at all, but it's like I say, it's that connection with, like I said before, I was trying to say before, that old knowledge that's gone right back. And we don't know how far back. When you touched upon it earlier on, and we, like I say, we can go. It goes as far back as Egypt, but then Egypt was just a blink. I mean, the Egyptians were built on stuff that was, you know what I mean. And so it was also, the only way you can pass this knowledge on is through oral tradition, because as you knew, we tapped upon it earlier on, to write was a skill, and not many people had it, and the people who had it were obviously putting the middlemen, they were putting their spin on stuff. Now, I mean, one of the things again, and I think again, the second point I wanted to make to that was, I think this is going to be one of the things, not just with, you're talking with the Brehon Law and stuff like that, it's just general, but one of the great things about, which mind blew me when I first heard about, Made Safe and the Safe Network, was because it's completely decentralized. In the future, how quick that is going to depend on how many people, obviously, take up, join the network. But it gives you the opportunity to switch your own, to participate in a supercomputer, because right now a lot of research, to hire a supercomputer costs absolutely thousands. But if you can have the mass computing powers, where you could, like I say, have all the people, a place where people could just put all these manuscripts, and with the help of all the supercomputing power to speed this process up and to dig deeper into this knowledge. To me, these are going to be the great inspiring things that technology can help us with, because to arise all these old knowledge and stuff like that. Now, one of the things, again, I wanted to sort of relate to you about, this is the general fascination, maybe a bit off topic, what we're talking about, the state of society and stuff, but obviously, I've been living up here now for a couple of years, and sort of Scotland and stuff like that. And everywhere I go, but even the end of my road, there's an old standing stone, and they, even on the little plaque, it says they don't know how long it goes back, maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. Got no really idea what it's about, but it's got these old, marks on it and languages and stuff like that. And you know what I mean? And I've always been fascinated to what standing stones is. Now, again, from my kind of knowledge of it, as I understand it, is that people associate them with, again, these tribal meetings, and again, with people gathering around these sort of places. But then I see, that sometimes I see just the odd one standing there, and I think, okay, what's all that about? And again, with your knowledge of what the Brehon Law and just generally, does any sort of standing stone have any kind of references? Is it mentioned? Are they brought up about what they're for, or?
Well, to my immediate knowledge, like, not specifically in the Brehon Law does it deal with standing stones, but what you might hear talk of in the legends would be that writing you're speaking of, Ogham writing, also pronounced by some people Ogham, and it's the scratches, it's the lines on the side of the corner of the stone, which they believe is very ancient. Some people say it's post-Christian, but I think there was one scholar who said it was post-Christian, but it's been fairly debunked. And it's this old ancient form of writing. Now, the Ogham would have only been taught to, you could say, initiated people, like educated people, the poets, the Brehons, the warriors, such as the Nafina and so on, would have understood this Ogham writing. The thing with the standing stones, I mean, it's not an area that I have delved too much into. I'm fascinated by them, and I see them. They're dotted all over this country. As my friend said, you can't swing a cat in Ireland without hitting a sacred site. So I mean, they're everywhere, and some of them would have been used, as astrological devices for measuring the movement of the planets and the stars throughout the year. I mean, you take the likes of Newgrange, which is aligned with the solstice. I mean, that's more of a passage grave, but it's trying to understand the culture that was why were they doing this and how did they do it. Some of them are fascinating when you've got the big boulder on top of a few little ones, and you don't know how did they do this. I think, again, I'm speculating here, that when researchers who are focused on this area start to explore the properties of sound that relate to these areas, the fact that perhaps there's something to do with vibrational resonances that can be made in these chambers, the resonance of the rocks and why they place them in these certain places. But certainly we know that they were used as astrological devices, in some cases, the round standing stones, because you can still see that they align to this day. But like, you take Newgrange again, that's all in the pyramids. You've got Nelt and Doubt, the three of them together. We don't know really what they were for. And I remember learning about these in school, and they'd say, oh, the carvings, this is what I was actually told in school, they must have been hallucinating the spiral patterns and the lozenges and these beautiful designs that seem to have meaning when you look at them, but we were told they must have been on drugs, and that they were just used as burial places. There's still a lot that remains to be learned about ancient Ireland, and I found it interesting that it's against the law in Ireland to even have an intention to look for a historical artifact. It's written into our legislation. Say if you had a metal detector, you went out into a field. If you have the intention of finding an archaeological object and you have that metal detector in your hand, you've committed an offence that you can be imprisoned for. So I think that there's a lot more that's yet to come out about Ireland, and there's probably, reasons why people are being diverted away from it, why people aren't able to speak the language, why people don't know about the Brehon Law and the ancient culture and the benefits and gifts that it can give, not just to society, but to each one of us as individuals, to connect with the way our ancestors did things, our ancestors' tongue. And just what I think of it, on the place names you were mentioning there, I think it's brilliant that they still have that in Scotland. I didn't know that. In Ireland, they still have the Irish place name comes first and then the English. And where I'm staying at the moment, there's Gaeltacht areas around me where they only have the Irish name. But with my limited Irish that I have, I look at the Irish version of this name and I translate it into English in my mind. So we have things like, okay, the county of Kildare in Leinster, the east of Ireland. Kildare translates as the Church of the Oak. So Kildare was an ancient site of Druidic worship in pre-Christian times, and this is where St. Bridget's temple was and so on. So think about that. The Irish names of these places, including Scotland, they tell you the history of that landscape. They describe either the features of the landscape, the topographical features, like Boon na Hown here in Ireland means the bottom of the river, or they tell you the legendary history of the place. So we have Maynooth, which is in Kildare, and Maynooth in Irish, as Gaeilge, is Maynooth, and that means the plain of Nuada, or Nuada's plain. And Nuada was the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the legendary, god kings of Ireland. This is fascinating, and Irish people will walk around, they don't see this, and that, imagine, I get inspired when I see this. It's exciting when I drive around the country then and I look at the place names and I go, oh, this is named, bottom of the well, or that's the priest's house. Or you learn so much about your landscape just by understanding what your ancestors called it. So, I mean, and it's be the same in Scotland, and same for the English people and the Welsh people. This is why I stress Anglo-Normans invaded Ireland, because that rhetoric of the English, like you said, you were brought up to hate Irish. Well, there's people in Ireland who are brought up to hate English, and that's, to me, it's a tragedy, because those people have way more in common with each other than the Crown or the Vatican, who were the elite. the elite establishment of those two countries that use them as pawns against each other. But we're the same family, we're the same common genetic group, even if you want to go that far, and we come from the same ancestors and the same culture. We can live in harmony with each other by looking at how our ancestors did things and adapting them to a modern world.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were discussing earlier on about how history has been written by the people who are, now in control, sort of thing. And I mean, sort of tapping into that, the standing stone. I mean, the standing stone where I live is right on the edge of a cliff face, because I look out across the river, the Clyde into the Highlands, and it's right on the edge of the cliff. And I mean, there's all these sort of myths about, it was done for this, and it was meant to send married couples, and you kind of lay all this mythology, and then you just realise that there's this stone that, like you said, is marking, because where I live, on the hill I live, it was an old tin factory. So it was like, I just look at it and think, well, that was just a signpost to say, look, over there is tin. Because this ties into what I'm trying to say, and it's one of the things I was mentioning about history is written by the people who have implemented the world we live in right now, is that they have this, like, we're all roughly taught in the main sort of stream media that prior to all these kings and queens, everything was all feudal and barbaric, and we were just a bunch of peasants all running around the fields, didn't know what we did. Man, you look back at some of these cultures, this is what I'm saying, it ties into their metalcraft, the way they lived. And I often do. I have to go out on my bike and cycle around some of the islands, and I've been out and about and stuff, and often I just sit there at times on the edge of a lock, and I'll look up at the mountain and think, this view hasn't changed for 10,000 years. And this is paradise. And if I know there's some gold over there, and I can manufacture to build whatever I want to build, and you think these people they had a paradise living. You know what I mean? And we look back at these people and go, there's nothing to learn from these people. These people were all just savages, and what they didn't, they were all living in, in huts and all this sort of stuff. And you understand more about how wide their culture was, how much knowledge and wealth they had about the world around them, society, and even the idea they knew where things were in the world, and they didn't just understand it was just the world was flat. So there's so much hidden knowledge that's there that I think is really inspiring and it should be to us all, to us right now, because the most inspiring thing to it is, and it ties into what you're doing with the Brehon Law, is this was all done without any central control, with no states, no feudal, no money. This was all just done by people, and it went on, and they flourished. They didn't all live like this.
That's precisely why it worked. That's precisely why it works, because it didn't have any of those things. It didn't have any middleman, any regulator, any state to intervene. So, I can't see any other way forward for humanity except to look back and in order to go forward. Look back to what our ancestors did, take the lessons from it, and then move forward to a freer society, which means stop giving your authority and your power away to an imagined institution.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that shift in mindset, and it's like you say, like you were saying earlier on. We're all sovereigns. We're all controls of ourselves, and that's the wake up moment. That is the real blue red pill. You know what I mean? Because it is choice. I mean, like you said earlier on, I don't want to stop anyone having a choice, but you can have a choice. You can see the world for what it is and understand these things, and then you can close your eyes and walk back into it. Well, that's your thing, but it is important. And the reason it's important, as you'll know, because it starts to affect real people in real ways. I mean, this isn't just an idle discussion between two people, on a late Tuesday night. This is, as you know, these states, this control affects real people, whether it's, like you say, whether it's down to the water system, whether it's down to how they, how they're just putting people in cages, as we were talking about earlier on. These are real effects of the world that they, that they control. But this is the great thing. This is where it's, I want to really emphasize this. There are solutions out there. There are things out there. There are synergies going on, and people are connecting. And that's what I'm saying. It's great. We can raise awareness and stuff like that. And it sort of taps into. And I really wanted to sort of like talk to you about this, and because you've mentioned it a few times in this conversation, but you're doing the work alongside Students of Liberty. One of the things that's great when you go to your website and you sort of just read the first page and you talk about what the whole thing is and how it's growing up. But one of the lines that really got me, and I'd love for you to sort of expand and talk about more about how this is actually put into practice and what it actually means, is you basically saying there, it's the three words. It says agents of change. That's what you want to make people to be, agents of change in society. It's kind of like, again, sort of like tie that in with what we do with Students of Liberty and how that sort of put into practice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, earlier on, remember I read out of that book about spontaneous order. But this, the thinker who came up with that idea was called Hayek, and Hayek also came up with this idea that social change doesn't come from politicians. That social change happens, it goes through several stages, but it begins with an idea, and it's usually intellectuals or thinkers who come up with an idea. And then it has to go from being an idea into the popular culture of the people. And only when the popular culture adopts that idea will politicians respond to that demand within the popular culture, and therefore make a law or change a policy to match what the people want, the will of the people. And that politicians will never make a change that is not congruent and sync up with that popular opinion first. So the idea is with Students for Liberty is that it's a student organization, and students generally are younger people who are going through a period of their life when they're considering new ideas. And so when I was in university, there was all sorts of organizations and groups and meetings that I could go to and events that were put on, but there was nothing like this. I could have gone to a Green Party meeting or a Socialist Party meeting or a Young Fianna Fáil or a Young Fine Gael. This to me turns my stomach, the thought of this, because it's like the same party politics, it's the same left, right. It's like, again, pantomime for the masses. There is no alternative voice. And I guess like the idea of Students for Liberty is to create that dialogue among students by going onto campuses and hosting an event, or information stands, giving away free literature, books, and so on. And the hope is that that this will inspire people, and they'll go on into their chosen fields, and they'll carry those beliefs with them into their chosen fields, and then it will begin to become pop culture. And it's a spreading of ideas, so that it's not about just theorizing. It's not about just sitting around philosophizing and talking about Thomas Aquinas or these ancient philosophers. It's about trying to practically do something with that information, trying to make a change, be an agent for change. So spreading the ideas through reason and debate and dialogue is the best way of doing that, because it empowers people for the first time, if they've never been exposed to these ideas, to begin thinking for themselves, to begin thinking in a different way. And then it's like this again, accepting that you don't know what comes next. It's up to that. You trust that those ideas will be carried forward because they stand for themselves and they're hard to deny. And once you grasp them, you don't want to let go of them. It's great to have this, real deep sense of freedom in your core. Nobody wants to let go of that. So it's, I guess, that this is how society will change, when we change ourselves and we change the people around us and not worry about the political system. That's the end of the line. They'll respond to how we change. So yeah, Students for Liberty, I'm like delighted to be part of it, because it's given me an opportunity now to really put all of my passion and my, the knowledge that I've acquired over the years, the thinking that I've done about all of this, into action, and to really kind of get out into the field, I guess, and to meet with, new people, new students who could be exposed to these for the first time. I was in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and this, as I mentioned earlier, was a conference for Students for Liberty, and I met over 100 of the most amazing people from all over Europe, from countries that I've never met people from before, because they're not a member of the European Union, so they don't have free movement and so on. But I was so inspired to learn that there's thousands of us out there,
Mm.
You know, there's thousands of people like me and you, and all these other people who are thinking about freedom and who are actually working towards it. The conference I was at, it was more of a retreat. Straight after we left, there was another group of 100 people coming in. There were so many new people joining the organization this year that they had to spread it out over 2 days. And this was just the new people, you know. So it's happening, and it's like the generation started coming up behind us, you know. They are the ones who are going to really push this in and reap the benefits of this world. Like, I reckon it, you know, they'll see benefits that we won't see, and their grandkids will see benefits that they won't see, and it'll move that rapidly. So Agents for Change is about really, you know, being the change you want to see in the world, doing something about it.
Yeah, man, that's exactly why, you know, that's exactly why I've always flown the flag, and that's exactly why I call it N99, Network 99, was exactly this idea of basically, let's connect people, let's put them all under the same network, you know what I mean, and we can all, and that's the whole point, we can start to fund ourselves and start to, you know, help ourselves, you know what I mean, and connect in ways that are going to really, really move things, because I've been the same as you, man, and I think the difference is I've been, like I said, I've been on this journey a bit longer and a bit more down the life's path in that sense, and it's always frustrated me that I've always known that there's these networks and these people out there have got this like-minded thing, but we've never been able to connect in any way. There's always been a barrier that's put between us, and it usually comes down to funding, because it's always down to money. It always comes down to, like, so many great ideas that get people together, but you know, centralization comes in, and there's got to be a committee, and then that person's got there's a treasurer, and before you know it, everything just falls apart, and then it's really sad, because whole ideas just get washed on the beach of desolation, because, you know, they all crumble under central control, because there was always a, you know, leader and all this sort of stuff. And this is what I think is really inspiring right now. It's why I fly the flag, and it's why I set up N99, was let's just get people together, and well, we can use this resource that's available to us now. We've got this resource, let's us shape it, let us be the ones on there. We can all fund each other and help each other completely out of anybody's touch. You know, we're completely stateless society. This is the actual point of it. No regulations, no government, nobody's going to come in and take your 10% and use it to go and fund an army. This is all just people connecting, and this is what's really inspiring, and that's why I think it's like I say, I think almost been the theme of this podcast is there's some great synergies on. And I think more people can be aware of what's going on with what you're doing, and learning about the Brehon Law, and whether it's called the Brehon Law or whether it's just called natural law, learning about these things, and equally people who are interested in these things understand what's coming with technology, because there's some great synergies going on at the moment, and that's what I'm saying. And I think it's really, I think what's crucial right now is that we don't miss this momentous moment, and we don't all just shrink into our corners, but we do actually connect, and we all shape, and this is what I think the essence of a whole the whole essence of a decentralized society, and the whole essence of what we're building is it's an open value. Everybody's got you know, every value is opinion is worth something, you know what I mean? So I always say to people, like with everything, and I think it's from both sides. Where, you know, it's from your side. People go and take, you know, go and join, go and take one of your online courses, learn about that. Equally, the other side, come and shape these things. It's all meet and shape these things. You know what I mean? Just don't, because if and I think it's really, I like to fly the flag for it, because I think the people like us who are on the edges of things, we tend to be the outsiders. We tend to be a bit. As much as we fly the flags for what we do, and we're happy to put our head above the parapet. What I've seen too many times before is that people just they have an idea, and then like I say, it just all falls apart, and instead of these great minds shaping things, it just all becomes fractional. And like you said, you have I'll go to the Socialist Worker Party, or I'll go to the Red Flag Party, and you know, and it all gets divided up.
It's moving deck chairs on the Titanic.
Exactly, and where we are right now is we've got the ability to, like I say, all of us to have to participate. We're all sharing it. We are all sovereign beings shaping a new world, and I think this is what's really inspiring. And again, we've been talking for a while now, right now, and I think this sort of, again, I think this is a perfect example, and it ties into what I'm saying. I mean, the reason me and you having this conversation is because I picked up on Tir Na Saor. excuse my pronunciation, I'm a bad cockney today. But I mean, do you know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. I mean, we've kind of gone this other conversation, and that's something that you sap again. And that's another really inspiring thing. And recommend people go out there and Google search it or find you out. And we'll get you at the end of the podcast to get out the details where to find it. But again, I mean, with the Tir Na Saor, obviously you like you said, you mentioned you stepped away from it right now. What's these sort of because I think there'd be a great synergy between Tir Na Saor and N99, because I think the idea you could put your own node up on that and you'd be self-generating money for it rather than having to ask for donations. I think it'd be a great thing. But what's the plans for Tir Na Saor for the in going forward? I mean,
well, at the moment, personally, I'm going to be focusing my time into the Brehon Law Academy and Students for Liberty for the next while. But thankfully, Tir Na Saor has been, it's been running for a long time now. It has a fairly big network, and there's lots of amazing people on Tir Na Saor who keep it going, and they have ownership of it. It's theirs as much as it's mine, and that's something I've always stressed from the start. It's a community website. It was built up by the input of everybody on that, and so that's why we don't have any censorship on it. And you get a lot of interesting conversations on it, a lot of interesting out there topics, but there's also a lot of really crucial knowledge in regards to the law and the state and all of these topics we've been talking about tonight, Brehon Law and so on. So I guess Tir Na Saor is now really, I see it more as just a kind of a beacon more so, or just a place for it has to stay up as an archive and as a place for people to come and talk about those topics without judgment and without censorship. And that's what it will remain. I mean, the radio is still there, and we still have some hosts on it who are going out. We've got Tony D who does regular music slots on it, and we'll have events throughout the year. We'll have meetups, organised throughout the year. Other than that, I'm going to be working on developing the courses for the Brehon Law Academy, so that these remain online, so that people can access them at any time. And I'm going to be focusing on Students for Liberty, and I'm working alongside Libertarian Ireland. You can check their Facebook page out as well. So, this week I'm going to be meeting up with Professor Jared Casey. I'm really excited about this. I have his book there on the wall. Jared Casey, he's an Irish professor who wrote a book called Libertarian Anarchy Against the State. And in this book, he also talks about the Brehon Law. So I'm very excited to meet with him. And I guess I'm just going to, as they say, go with the flow and keep my intention, in my mind and in my heart, and just take any opportunity that comes up to spread the ideas and spread the cause of liberty.
Well, as I said to you before many times, I mean, we for a while like this. I mean, we would definitely have to get, definitely the Brehon Law Academy, definitely Tir Na Saor. We'll definitely link you up with N99, because I think the audience is already there right now. As I said before, we're all very much like-minded people, man, and it's amazing, and it's great. I mean, I'd recommend anyone listen to your angle, go, maybe listen to this, the audience you maybe come across from your audience, go and check out the safe forum or the main safe. Just go and check out what's going on, because there's a lot of people, and it's really inspired me. There's like I said, I mean, you talked about who you're being inspired, going to Germany and meeting the people. Man, these people are everywhere around the world. I mean, do you know what I mean? And what's really inspiring to me is that these people are meeting, and we're all shaping the new world. And there's no leaders in this thing. You know what I mean? We're all just there shaping it, and that's why I say I would definitely get have to look up N99 and Tir Na Saor and what you're doing, because I think like I say, there's a ready-made audience out there that are already like-minded, and do you know what I mean? I think would, like anybody else, anybody listening, anyone generally, this is knowledge that people should know. This is to me and I think it's crucial for the world we're going to be living in, because as I said before, whether we like it or not, and people, think that the system's going to carry on, we're going to be like, it's not. The world is going to change. That's what we know. The world is going to be changing. Technology is going to advance. Whether the system's going to collapse, whether it's 10 years time, 1 year's time, 2 weeks time, 100 years time, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. We move on. We're not the same as we were 200 years ago. And what's important is we keep these wisdom that we've had as humanity alive, and whatever means we can, and I think it's really crucial, and that's what's crucial about the Brehon Law, because I think it's like you say, you'll call it the Brehon Law, it's called natural law. You have the same thing as whether you go to, like you said, with the Amazon or it's the same thing, but it's keeping that torch alive, and that's what's important. And I think it's where we are right now. Look, before we wrap this up, I mean, man, we've been kind of in and out and stuff like this, and one of the things I kind of got written in front of me, and I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and I think it's a really good kind of story that sums up the Brehon Law, how a decentralized world can work, and how things are functioning. It's a story of it's called The Judgment. It's one of your blog pages, and it's called The Judgment, and Cormac McCart, and the story of the boy king. So again, just tell us the story of the boy king, and I think it's a very like I say, inspiring and insightful kind of insight into how the whole of the Brehon Law were kind of summarized to me in that little story.
Well, again, remember earlier on I was talking about Sir John Davies, who said that there's no nation of people who love justice better than the Irish. It was something that they really delighted in. Like a court case, people would go to watch what was happening because they wanted to see justice in action, and when they seen it, they feel it in their heart, they got excited by it. So it's something that they delighted in. It was a really kind of noble characteristic to have about you. If you had good judgment, you were considered highly. And the story goes, King Cormac McCart is one of Ireland's most famous legendary kings and lawgivers. I say legendary, he's an actual person, but they say legend has been ascribed to him, and he's actually accredited as writing the Book of Achill, which was another Brehon Law manuscript. He's credited as writing this in his old age. But as a boy, as the story goes, that the High King of Ireland, who again was a ceremonial position and who was elected and so on, and he sat at Tara. And Cormac's father was a rightful king of Tara, whose throne had been usurped when Cormac was a boy. And for protection, Cormac was raised by a sheep herder, like a farmer woman called Benaid. And one day, her sheep escaped and got into the Queen's field and ate these plants that she had, these special plants that were used for dyeing clothes. They're very expensive. Was outraged by this, and she wanted restitution. She took the woman to law, and at the time, like a king would also be a judge, because a king was embodiment of good judgment as well. So it was this usurping king who was her husband. She called on her husband and said, "I want you to hear the case." So the whole village of Tara gathered around to watch the proceeding, and the Queen made her claim against the woman. The woman made her defense, and the king said, "Well, your sheep escaped, that's animal trespass. You must give your sheep now to my wife as compensation." And this young boy was outraged by this. He couldn't stand still while he heard such a false judgment being given, and he couldn't help himself. And he shouted out at the top of his voice, "That is a false judgment. For as the fleece of the field will grow back, so shall the fleece of the sheep grow back." And that in compensation for the weeds or the plants that were eaten, the woman should give the wool of her sheep to the value of the crops, and this way she could keep her livelihood. And the people applauded and said, "This is truly the judgment of a king." And they realized that King Cormac McCart was who he was, and the rest is history then.
And that is a perfect summary, and like I say, a perfect summary of what we've been talking about in the whole of this this conversation. Now, before we sort of wrap it up, I mean, again, we kind of touched upon three sort of areas that you're focused on. Tir Na Saor, you've got the Students for Liberty, and obviously the Brehon Law Academy. Where can people find out about where do people go to find out more, And the second sort of part to that question would be for someone who's going to go to the, especially to the Brehon Law Academy site and stuff. What would, if someone's going to take an online course, kind of give us an overview? What would that, for the person, if I was, who should take it? What does it involve? How much time and how much? Kind of walk someone through it. How would it be seen from their point of view if someone was to take one of your courses?
Okay, well, for Tir Na Saor, which, as I said earlier on, means land of the free. I mean, if you Google it, you'll find it straight away. It's spelled TIR, new word NA, new word SAOR. And we have our Facebook page is very active. If anyone's on Facebook, you'll get updates all the time on that. The Brehon Law Academy is at brehonlawacademy.ie. And the courses are something that I've been continuously developing and working on now for a long, long time. And they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've delivered a course in Dublin. I've delivered a course in Cork, which was live, where people actually came, and I had to book a venue and a projector and so on. What I want to do now is I'm reevaluating how I want to deliver this, because I want the content to get out to people. What I want to do is put them online on, I don't know if you've heard of Udemy.
Mm-hmm.
Udemy, so you can upload your, so these courses will probably be, anywhere from 1 hour to 4 or 5 hours long, depending on what they are. So if you want to do a course on the Brehon Law, it'll probably be a 4-hour long course, which you could do in your own time following the modules. If it was something like the history of the Druids, or maybe the role of women specifically in Ireland, that might be an hour long. But I really want to cover all the aspects of early Irish culture. So I have a lot of work to do. But that should be up in the new year. I should have that all up and ready to go in the new year. And it will be online all the time then. I won't have to book, organise an event at a certain date in a certain place and so on. So it'll be up there, and anybody in the world will be able to access it. And the studentsforliberty.org is the main website for Students for Liberty. And from that, you'll be able to connect with local coordinators from all over the world. So, I mean, anybody who's listening to this from Scotland or the UK, you go onto that page and you'll be able to connect with the UK local coordinators. And you can get Students for Liberty Ireland on Facebook to connect with our group here in Ireland. And that's about it. That's how you can contact me. Or tirnasaor@gmail.com if you want to send me any, feedback or questions or whatever.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, before we do wrap this up, and I kind of, again, I just reiterate from my angle that, when you just said about the online courses, it's one of the things that again, it really inspires me, and I'm going to go away this, the next few weeks and see if we get this sorted out. Because what inspired me thinking was like, if I'm someone right now, I could go on a network, and just because I've got some, like it would be a safe coin or a token of some sort that I would be given to me just because because I'm part of the network, which is the whole point of the safe network. Just by giving a part of your computer, you're going to be rewarded. That's what farming's about. You're rewarded because you're given a part of that tied to the super mind sort of thing. So you've already been given resources without having to do anything, just because you've just given your computer away. Those resources can be used for an online course, and I can do that all directly. I haven't got to go through PayPal or through anybody else. This is what's inspiring me. I'm thinking that'd be great. So I could sit there, have my laptop on, farm some Safecoin, then use that Safecoin to go and learn that, do an online course, and I haven't had to use my bank. I haven't had to go anywhere near any dollars, pounds, anything. I've just done this all directly just by switching my computer on. This is where how I vision things in the future. I think people can have direct access, and they're not having to sort of think. And this is what's going to be inspiring, because it's going to mean that anybody who can switch into the network will have those resources available. So it's going to be completely open to anybody, whether you're a millionaire or you've got $1 in your pocket. As long as you can get online and you can get your laptop or your phone or anything else, you're getting resources. This is what's going to open up, because it's going to open up to everybody, as it should be. All information should be there for everybody, and it helps both ends, because it means you're going to be, you'll get resources which you need, because you need, someone's got to run the website, man. I know that kind of stuff, but equally, it's a synergy thing, man. So, man, well, like I say, there's so many inspiring things that are just coming in the world right now, and I think one of the great things about this conversation and about you know, where we are right now is that there's so many like-minded people meeting, and it inspires me on a daily basis to think where we're going to be in 5 or 6 years time, let alone in a year's time. And as you know, man, we'll definitely have to come back on this podcast, you know, soon after the launch, and we're away from this Google crap and we're on the new system, because again, I think even though we've been pretty balls deep tonight, we've really kind of scratched upon the surface of things. So kind of before we sort of wrap it up, man, I mean, how would you sort of summarize it? What would you, you know, sort of, you know, in the last paragraph, what would you want people to go away with, you know, remembering from this conversation? What you know, what would be your parting words to the masses out there, man?
I would say it is the responsibility of the current living generation to decide what world we live in. It's up to us to decide what the history books say about this time. So it's about not waiting for change to come from government or from outside of yourself, but we have to be the change and change the world to a better one.
Man, all I can say is amen to that, man. And well, from me in Scotland, and man, from Kevin over in there in Ireland, man, life is people.
Good night.